Hey, are you ever going to start this podcast you've been talking about for like forever?
Do you think that anyone will actually want to listen to something like this?
What is your plan for an introduction?
Are you sure you want to talk about these topics? People usually disagree.
3 hours? Are you crazy?
Do you think you're some kind of expert or something?
Are you planning to have an intro song?
What if a bunch of people get really mad and hate you over this?
Do you even know how to make a podcast?
Are you just doing this because you like to argue with people?
Don't let this be just one more thing that you talk about doing, but never actually do.
Wouldn't it be better to do just one episode for each topic?
Stop trying to change people's opinions. Just live your own life.
Dude, people are never gonna agree. Just let it go.
Is this going to be a long intro? Because if it is, I'm bored already.
Hello, thanks for being here to hear another episode. Before we get to today's conversation, I wanted to share something with you. Many years ago, the American Library Association started releasing posters that had famous people reading, or sometimes just standing there holding, certain books. Each poster would have the word "read" really big across the top, and they were usually hung in libraries or school classrooms. I'm sure you've seen these. I assume that the goal was to make kids want to read, just like their favorite actor, athlete, or musical artist. I still see some of these hanging in certain places, and I started to notice something interesting about them. I'm not going to tell you what, but I'm just going to name some famous people, and the title of the book they are reading on the poster. Maybe you will see the same thing I do, maybe not. Either way, I don't really care that much. Here we go, and this is just a selection. Antonio Banderas, Don Quixote. Henry Cavill, a Superman comic. Oprah Winfrey, Beloved. Jimmy Smits, Down These Mean Streets. Colin Farrell, Dubliners. Taylor Lautner, Twilight. Orlando Bloom, Lord of the Rings. Shailene Woodley, Divergent. Kirk Cameron, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. John Cena, The Story of Ferdinand. Constance Wu, Crazy Rich Asians. Salma Hayek, Frida, a biography of Frida Kahlo. Billy D. Williams, Song of Solomon. Nicolas Cage, Siddhartha. Sean Connery, The Spirit of Scotland. John Leguizamo, Conquest, Montezuma, Cortez, and the Fall of Old Mexico. Hilary Swank, Freedom Rider's Diary. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Misty Copeland, We Were 8 Years in Power. And Tim Allen, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. As I already said, I'm not going to tell you what I found interesting about these selections, but if you want to let me know what you think, send me an email at whycan'twetalkaboutThat@proton.me. My guest today is Monique Klosterman. Many, many moons ago, when I was probably around 20 years old, Monique and I used to work together at a locally owned pizzeria. She was lots of fun to talk to back then, and today is no different. Whenever I get together with someone who used to work there tends to be much laughter and sharing of memories and stories about our time there. You will get to hear some of that today, but you will also get to hear some very interesting thoughts from someone who has had some unique life experiences. I had a lot of fun catching up with her after all these years, and I learned many new things. Things mentioned in today's episode are working at Arnoldis, almost dying in Alaska, Eurythmy, Waldorf education, homeschooling, Civil War balls, jabs, masking, letting people do what they want in the bedroom, sexual content in books, the Transgenda, parental rights, defining normal, offending people, 60s and 70s classic rock, Red Hot Chili Peppers, U2, Jack Johnson, DJ Quik, Led Zeppelin, Edward Scissorhands, COVID, Censorship, Anthony Fauci, the Catholic Church, Anthroposophy, Rudolph Steiner, the turning point of time, being open-minded about religion, reincarnation, original sin, the redemption of Bill Gates, the mystery of Golgotha, and near-death experiences. If you want to be my friend, please leave a review wherever you are listening to this. If you want to be my best friend, please send me some feedback to whycan'twetalkaboutThat@proton.me. If you know anyone who is interested in being a guest on this show, please don't hesitate to let me know. Thanks. Enjoy the conversation. How did you meet your husband?
Well, when I went to school in Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay.
So his sister was my roommate.
Oh, nice.
And then when she got married when we were 28, I was living in Hawaii, and then I came back for the wedding. And we were both part of the wedding party. So that's when we actually started dating. But I knew him since I was in college.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I remember back when we were working at the pizza place together.
I know you were already were you already married?
So it gets jumbled in my mind, like as far as like what the time frame is. So when you worked there, who was the owner? Was it? What's
the old guy's name?
Gino?
Yeah.
Okay, so Gino was still there. So I don't think I was married yet.
Okay.
So I was 18 when I first started there as a driver.
Okay.
And then I had my first daughter when I was 20. And I still worked there during that time. That was 98. Well, it was 96 when I started there, 98 when my daughter was born.
98. And I think we were working there in I was working there 98. So your daughter might have just been born.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you were like so focused, like just serious. I'm here to work. I'm getting my job.
Oh,
done.
yeah.
Like, don't talk. Like, everybody was like, because most of the people there were like,
real lackadaisical. Yeah.
Yeah. You were not like that.
Well, we still tell. So I work at Ricky's now, as I told you before. But
Ricky doesn't own it anymore.
He doesn't, but it's owned by Pat and Jen Silva.
I don't know who they are, but
okay. Well, Pat used to work at Arnoldis too as a driver.
I think I kind of know the name. We probably Did you go to Rigetti?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Probably went to school with him.
Yeah. He was. I think he was one grade younger than me, so he would have graduated 97 because I graduated in 96. You were what, 94?
92.
92.
You graduated in 96 Rigetti?
96, yeah.
Oh my God, so you were like a freshman when I was like a senior.
Yeah, probably.
Oh
yeah, because you knew my cousin and my...
Who's your cousin?
We've talked about this a long time ago. You probably forgot. My cousin's Danny McFarlane.
Oh, yeah.
But he was friends with Jeremy Morless.
Oh, yeah, I dated him.
Yeah,
I went to
exactly.
dance with him.
Okay.
And then I left early.
Yeah.
It was really bad.
He had a big impression on you, I guess, huh?
He was horrible.
Oh, boy.
He was really nice, but I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. You just weren't interested at the time. Yeah. Yeah.
It was
So.
sad. It was embarrassing.
Oh no!
But I like the dress that my mom made me a really nice dress to wear.
Well, there you
so
go.
That was the highlight of that dance. Is like my mom made me this dress, and
that's awesome.
I just found it, and my daughter's gonna, I'm like, she needed a dress to wear, so I think I've got some dresses at home, so I pulled out, and there's that dress that I wore to that dance.
Right.
My mom handmade it.
Oh, that's
it's
awesome!
Like classic.
And you still have it?
Yeah.
Oh wow!
I just pulled it out like a month ago. So my daughter can have dresses now.
Right. How old's your daughter?
I need to buy dresses.
Your daughter's got to be what?
She's going into 8th grade.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So she's the same age as my youngest son then.
Yeah.
Or no, he's going into, I think he's going into, he's 13.
She's 13.
She's 13. Okay. I can't remember if he's going to 7th or 8th because we homeschool. So it's I lose track of who's in what grades. Yeah. I mean, we do the co-ops and stuff still.
But you're not with Heartland.
No, I don't think.
You don't.
But see, again, because you guys have changed names so many times. Heartland's the one that used to be Inspire, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember we were there for a while because I think you were my daughter's teacher for a while, right?
For the EA, yes.
For the EA, yes, exactly. Which was once or twice a week, I think, something.
Once a week.
Once a week, okay. Yeah, over at the Methodist Church behind Rigetti. So, yeah. But, So anyway, back to...
What grade is your daughter in?
My daughter is in...
I think she's a year younger than Pete.
She's a
9th grade.
Freshman or sophomore.
10th. She must be going into 10th.
She is.
Pete's going into 11th.
Okay, yeah, because she's 15.
Class. Yeah, he's 16.
Okay.
Yeah, because I did his class, so she was in. So I knew she's around Pete's age, but I think she was younger.
Okay, nice.
Anyway, sorry.
And you had the two kids.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. How many do you have?
We have 4 total.
Oh, that's so cool.
But 2 of them are adults already. So my oldest is I think she's gonna be 25.
Wow.
She's married, living down in Whittier with her husband.
So cool.
She works with kids on the spectrum, so she really enjoys her job. She went to school and got a degree in psychology, and so she's doing that, loving that. Her husband is an art major, so he's currently working at Joann's, but he's looking for something more in his field. No grandkids yet, and then my oldest son is 22. And he's the one that just answered the door when you got here. So he's back living here again. He was living down in Corona for a while. So he's back at home. He's working over at GameStop and doing, doing his thing, trying to save up some money. And so, yeah. Yep. And then we just got Addie and Asher, the two that are still underage. So it's fun. It's been a whirlwind. But I was going to say, when we were talking about Arnoldis and like how nonchalant things were. I mean, I don't know how it was when you got hired, but like me and Pat and other people that used to work there were always talking about these stories. But like they were like, oh, do you want a job? You looking for a job? And I said, well, no, not really. So we're doing a job. I said, okay. Just come down around 5. Around 5? Like, what in the world? Yeah, just come down around 5 and ask for this. I think it was Mike. Ask for Mike. Because you remember Mike Christensen that used to work there.
No, it wasn't Mike. Oh, yeah, it was Mike.
Yeah, Mike and... Because Mike and Ricky were the main cooks at that time. I called him
Michael.
Oh, wow. How official. Very official.
Yeah, so
okay.
I'm like, Mike.
Yeah, Michael. Okay, so I went to...
my neighbor.
Oh, really?
When I was in 2nd grade.
I haven't talked to that guy in forever. I should call him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I go in there around 5. He says, hey, how's it going? You know, Mike, he's just real kickback. He said, oh, yeah, so you're going to start? Yeah. Can you start tomorrow? Sure. Yeah, what time? Nah, it's around 5. It's like there's no schedule, just come in around 5. Yeah, it's around 5. Okay. And then you come in there and there's no time, nothing. You just write your name down that you arrived at a certain time. But I mean, then there was people that would come in like he would get fired, right? This guy I'm thinking of would be told, you're done, because he'd come in late all the time. You're done. But he'd still come in. And he'd always say, man, I hate when they scratch my name off the schedule. And then just put his name back on the schedule, and he just keep working, and they kept paying him and everything. And that was all the time. I was like, this place is like...
Wait, who told you to go there?
Oh, Mondo.
Oh.
So Mondo's the one that originally told me to go down and talk to Mike. Because I was in there. I was actually a senior in high school, and I played tennis. So the tennis team was in there for a pizza party. And then Mondo was the one that was like our waiter. He was serving us and stuff. And he's like, hey, are any of you guys 18? And then 4 or 5 of us raised our hands, right? And he goes, anybody want a job? And at the time I was working at Taco Bell. So I was like, And I said, yeah, sure. You guys hiring? What? He goes, yeah, just come down around 5 and talk to Mike.
But do you remember the paycheck issue?
Yes.
We'd have to run down on Monday morning.
Yes.
Right when Bank of America opened up to beat Gino to get our money out.
Or they would call us. Like Mike used to call me. Because the lady at the bank would call him. Hey, Gino just came down and made a big deposit. If you guys want to come down. And then Gino get mad at us. What are you guys doing? You got to go down and cash all your checks. Gino, we got 4 or 5 paychecks. We're not working for free, right? It's like, what is this? This is the worst run business I've ever seen. But the food was great, right? It was the best pizza in the world. But man, the business side of it was so horrendous. It's like, but that's why we have cool stories to tell today, right? It wasn't funny at the time where you have 5 paychecks. You're like, I need to eat. It's like I got these things stacked up over here. Yeah, you can't try to cash your paycheck. Oh, sorry, we can't cash this for you. Insufficient funds. What do you mean? It's a paycheck. What do you mean insufficient funds? Like, it's right here. Yeah, just ridiculous.
And Gino was my mom's elementary school teacher.
He was a teacher?
He was a teacher.
Oh, I didn't know that.
At Benita School.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yes. So, anyways.
Yeah, they were cool people, but so.
Pretty laid back.
Yes. Yeah. I remember that one guy. There was one guy that came in and punched Gino. Were you there for that?
No.
Oh, yeah, because it was over a paycheck thing.
Okay.
I came back from a delivery, and Gino had a big old goose egg on his head, and the cops were there. I was like, what did I miss? At first, I thought he fell down or something. And then it might have been Bobby was cooking that night, but he's like, oh no, so-and-so came in here and he was all ticked off and started to argue with Gino about the paychecks and got him in a headlock and punched him in the head. I was like, are you kidding me? It's an old man. You punched an old man in the head? Yeah. Come on, people.
Bobby's the one who told me to come in.
Oh, really? He was your in to...
Yes. I was home. I just finished college and then I went to Alaska for a few months, and I came home and I was hanging out and I was thinking that I would go to grad school, but it didn't start until the summer. So I went out with some friends and I saw Bobby.
Okay.
And he's like, come work with us at Arnoldis.
Yeah.
Just come in. So I did.
Nice.
And that's how I started delivering pizzas.
Wasn't that fun? It's such a fun. I mean, that was such a fun time in my life. Like all the interesting people. Like, remember Johnny?
Yes.
Okay. He was awesome. He was so funny. Oh man, I remember when he died. That was like the biggest. Like, oh man, I got that call. I was working that day, and someone called. It was during the daytime. It must have been like on a Sunday or something. So I think that was the daytime I used to work. But I was the only one there. Arnoldis. I said something about John and Idris. I was like, oh, he's off today. He's not, or maybe I said, oh, he doesn't come in until later tonight. And he says, well, sir, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but he actually passed away last night. And I was like, what? Like, what? No way. So, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
I think I was only there from, say, October through March.
Oh, really? Not even a full year, huh? Mm-mm. Seems like you were there longer than that.
No, because then my now sister-in-law was working up in Yosemite, and she wanted me to go work up there for a few months before I left, which was not fun at all. I worked at an outdoor school for a few months, and it was snowing. That was the year that we had a lot of rain. It was one of those El Nino years, 97.
Oh, yeah. It was bad back then.
That was the year.
Okay.
And it was just snowing all the way through June. So we get all these kids from the Central Valley. They don't know anything about how to dress for the snow. And we have to take them hiking in the snow. And they have cotton socks on. And it was just... And then the food. I'm kind of picky about food. The quality of the food was just really poor. And they gave us like $25 a week. Because, as a stipend. Because it was an internship.
Okay.
So it was not... fun.
Wow.
I had to eat that. So I had to eat their food. And they gave us room and board, but my trailer, all the pipes were frozen.
No. So you had no water?
No.
Oh no.
So I had to go to different buildings.
Yeah.
So it was not fun. So I would have rather have stayed working at Arnoldis a few more months. That would have been...
Was that your first teaching job then, or was the outdoor school?
Well, it was one of the internships I did.
But don't you feel like that by doing those that helped open the doors to what you're doing now? Like, no, you you could have done without those.
I mean, I don't even think I've ever put that experience on any resume, really.
Okay.
It was just a blip.
You're trying to block it out. It never happened. Never happened.
I mean, I worked at an outdoor school there, but I had just come back from Alaska, and so when you compare Denali National Park to Yosemite. I mean, I'm not trying to say anything bad, but Yosemite was more like Disneyland to me. And Denali's wild. You have bears and wolves. And bald eagles. And, it's just so different.
Yeah. Which did you prefer?
Well, Denali.
Okay. You like the more...
It's just so pristine.
Okay.
And Yosemite's beautiful, but there's just so many people there. So you don't get that feeling like you're out really in nature. Yeah. I don't.
So you prefer to feel like you're out in nature with like bears walking around and stuff?
Yes, and wolves.
You're not scared of getting eaten?
And moose.
Moose. Isn't it meese? Wouldn't you say meese?
No.
Oh.
No, actually I was more afraid of the moose than I was of the bears.
Yeah, those things are massive.
Yeah, they'll charge you.
Ugh.
But I never saw a bear. I mean, I did see bears in Alaska, but not while I was out hiking.
Wow. So. That's awesome. See, I'm always scared to go places like that, personally. But
when you're younger, you don't think of it.
That's true. You have that. What do they call that? There's a word for that. Like you get to a certain age where you start to realize that you could die.
Yes.
Not that you're thinking you're going to die soon, but your mortality becomes a reality. It's like, wait. And then you look back at the things you did when you were younger, you're like, wow. I would never do that now. It's like some of the crazy things you did. It was like, I could have easily died doing that, Yeah.
Yeah, oh, I know. Well, I kind of learned that in Alaska because I did almost die there.
Oh, wow.
So, well, not really, but kind of. I went hiking by myself and I fell down a side of a cliff and I was pretty far out.
Did you get hurt?
No, I didn't.
Okay, no broken bones or nothing?
No, I figured out how to get down.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't a dramatic thing, but I was kind of stuck and I realized, what did I do?
Yeah.
So then it was like, that's when you're sitting on the edge of a cliff and you don't know how you can get out of it.
Yeah.
And you start to think, maybe I shouldn't have done this.
Right.
Oh, my poor parents.
Oh, yeah, all those thoughts.
And all the things I wanted to do, and I haven't done them yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, you got farther than me. I would have never been sitting on a cliff, because that's not what people should ever do, ever.
You remember? Yeah, that's what I
No
mean.
cliffs.
When you were already, when I was 23,
Yeah.
and however, you were probably only 18 or whatever,
Yeah.
you were already very, like, mature.
Yeah.
I noticed that.
Oh, you're saying back then?
Back then.
Oh, wow.
You were very mature.
Wow.
You weren't.
Maybe that was my work persona. I don't know.
You had a work persona.
I must have.
Yes.
Because I don't think I was very mature outside of that.
I always had. I thought you were pretty much like a grown-up person.
Okay.
Kind of.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you already were really focused. I mean, obviously, I think, yes,
Right.
I remember now. I think your daughter was either there or on her way whenever.
Okay.
When was her?
She was born in November of 98.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe not, because
Okay.
I have, maybe not.
But maybe my wife was pregnant.
Maybe.
Maybe I knew it was coming. I was going to be a dad soon or whatever.
Yeah, you just had that vibe. Like.
The dad vibe?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm focused. I'm here. I'm working. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like everybody else was like, la-di-da.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Well, I probably felt that way more so when they put me in like the cooking role, because that's kind of like a manager role. And then I was doing the prep work and, beyond like just a driver. But I think I drove with you too. I'm pretty sure we were drivers together at some point. But again, it's all fuzzy to me. Fuzzy. And so many people came through there during the however many years I worked there. Mm-hmm. And it was off and on. I quit for a while and then I came back. And that's why I was asked who the owner was, because we went through all these different owners over the years.
And Patrick. I still see Patrick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see him sometimes. Yeah. Whenever I'm in Old Orchid over there, I'll bump into him somewhere. Me and my wife ate at Kay's a couple weeks back, and he was coming out of the liquor store right there as I was walking down that area. So yeah, he's like, Hester.
I like Patrick.
Yeah, he's funny. He's awesome. But so.
Oh, can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
So you said I said something like, I'm like, why did you want to interview me? You said, oh, you said some things when we worked together. Like, what did I say? What did I say?
I don't remember a whole lot of specific. And it's not so much things you said. It was just that you were unique. Like I remember. Okay, so here's a couple memories I have. Mm-hmm. I remember back then I was a vegetarian. Oh. So you and I had a lot of conversations about that, because you have always been very earth-minded, if that's the right word. Like you always seemed very conscious of what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, I like to think of myself as conscious.
Yes, like earth conscious, right? Like
conscious in general.
Well, conscious. Right, you care about those things. You seem to be concerned with things like that, to where you were going to make changes in your own life, to where you're like, oh, yeah. I'm not going to live this way. And
all the stickers on my car.
Yeah, exactly, right? And you weren't a vegetarian at the time. Oh, you were at that time.
But I would eat the pizza even though it had the lard on the bottom.
That's what it was. Okay, so that's what we would talk about, where I wouldn't. I would always put the olive oil. And I think, because back then I was kind of like an animal rights activist. I didn't
know that you had the option.
Yeah, so I think we used to go back and forth with that. But then one time you came back from somewhere, maybe you hadn't worked there in a while, and you came back, and I think you ordered a pizza with pepperoni on it or something. I was like, what's the deal? And you're like, oh, I eat meat now.
Oh, when I went to New Hampshire.
Maybe, yeah.
I stopped being a vegetarian because I that's a whole... Yeah.
Okay. Are you vegetarian now?
No.
Okay.
No, because I got into the Weston Price Foundation.
Okay.
And that is not vegetarian. And
gotcha.
That's what I've been ever since.
Okay.
Into that.
Okay. So we'll definitely talk about that. But then the other thing was that I was remembering... and you might not remember this. I have no idea what it was called, but you were telling me about a language that was wordless.
Eurythmy.
Is that what it's called? And you were showing me like different postures. And you're like, so like if you're like this, and you're like,
okay,
and like things like that. Like I'm like, okay, like and anyway, I've always thought to myself, Monique is like a very unique person. Right, like,
unique. Yeah.
Monique, unique. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, so that's the only reason. Plus, I haven't talked to you in like 30 years, really, about anything serious. So it'd be kind of fun.
I kind of wondered about that, because remember, like I don't know if I texted or emailed you. Like I usually listen more than I talk, just because back when I was that age, I was more like telling da 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 da, and I got some bad experiences.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's from family, uncles.
Just from sharing your thoughts on things, and
so then I realized it's probably better if I just keep my thoughts to myself.
Yeah.
And then what I'll occasionally do is I'll like put a little like bait out to see if people will take it.
Yeah.
And then if they do, that's great. And if they don't, I'm like, okay. But I don't, like, back then, I would just do Eurythmy. Like, I did Eurythmy this morning before I got here.
Okay.
But I don't, like... Is
it like kind of like yoga? I mean, is it supposed to be like, is it just between you, or is it like something you express to other people? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, is it like a meditation kind of thing that you do personally, or is this something that you're like, okay, I'm gonna...
It's all of the above.
All of the above, okay.
And it's something it's an art form.
Okay.
It's like a renewed form of dance.
Okay.
And so
and it's called Eurythmy.
Eurythmy.
Not Eurythmics.
But so when you get to the spirituality part, it's connected. So my background is Waldorf education.
Okay, which I don't even know what that is, so we can talk about it when we get there.
Oh gosh.
I know what Waldorf salad is. That's pretty good.
Well, it may be slightly connected. It might be.
Yeah.
Anyways,
but I mean,
it's, and that's what I was saying. And sometimes it's hard to put words, but it isn't. And it's really cosmic.
Okay.
Because it goes to, so then I can keep. So, because when I was younger, I wouldn't necessarily keep it. I'd be like, no. Like, I would do Eurythmy, and like, that's not, most people would be like, what the, So
which I kind of was, to be honest with you. I was kind of like, what is she talking about?
I know.
But, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's unique. Like I said, it's something I've never heard anybody else talk to me about that ever. And I still remember it 30 years later. So, I mean, what does that tell you?
And my poor kids, like, I think I was doing Eurythmy in the backyard one day, and the neighbor kids were over, and I didn't know they were in the house.
Oh, no.
Like, in the backyard.
Your kids are like selling tickets. Hey, come watch my mom in the backyard.
There, and I'm like, da-da-da.
That's awesome.
And they're like, is your mom okay? Like, so my kids are like telling me afterwards, like, the neighbors were watching you, and they're like, is your mom? What's wrong with your mom?
Oh, that's awesome.
But it's like not. It's a thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I could have told him it's like Qigong because people are more familiar with that.
Right.
But
yeah.
So then I had the neighbors' kids kind of look at me a little bit.
And I go up and tell their parents, I think that lady's eating mushrooms over there. I don't know what's happening.
I'm so embarrassed.
Oh man, that's so cool though. That's awesome. But so I go into music first.
Okay.
How do you feel about music? Are you a music person? Do you like to listen to it, sing, play? What do you like? What's your background with music? You're at least a fan, I assume.
Yes, I would like to say that I'm musical, but I don't think I have a talent for it. I mean, I have tried to play so many different instruments. I own so many different instruments.
Really? Okay.
So it all goes back to I'm a Waldorf teacher.
Okay. And tell me what that is. Tell me what that is. So
when does it start?
We've been going this whole time.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to cut out a lot of the beginning part. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a Waldorf teacher first.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. So you feel like everything else kind of...
Waldorf education is that everybody's an artist.
Okay.
Because art is just a way that you express yourself.
Right.
So in the schools, we don't just value reading, writing, and math. Art is just as important.
Okay.
So drawing, painting, singing, instruments, movement, it's all just as important because the whole human being, not everybody is really good just at math or writing. Some people are really good at music. And why do we just keep it so limited to just those things?
Right.
In education.
Okay.
So Waldorf education is letting the human being just be who they are and who they're, letting them unfold and bring the gifts and share the gifts of the world that they have. Okay. So. And
you would say that's every person.
Every human being.
Every human has some form of art in them.
Some gift and a destiny.
Okay.
And instead of the school trying to put it in them, it's let them unfold. Let it water them.
Right.
And let them unfold.
Like naturally.
Yes. But it's not just, it's very structured. So it's not, so every grade has a different theme because every age, like a 2-year-old's consciousness is very different than a 10-year-old's. So we meet the child right where they are.
Okay.
So because of that, a Waldorf teacher needs to not just be good at math and reading and writing, and not be good at it, but to present to the children painting and music. So every day in a Waldorf school, we would sing, we would recite poetry, we would play our recorders.
Did you ever find kids that just didn't want to do any of that, like they felt uncomfortable doing that kind of thing, or?
Not really.
Really, most of them are all into it?
Most children are naturally like that, and they're born that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then as they get older, they become self-conscious, or they don't think they're good at it.
Right.
But if they're always doing it every day like they do in a Waldorf school, they don't even think twice about it. It's just, I mean, I love teaching middle school, and they just bring out their recorders and and they're really good.
Okay.
And the beautiful thing is you see them become better than you. Really quick.
Yeah.
Because I'm not good at any of those things.
Okay.
But I was a Waldorf teacher because I never had those things and I wanted those things. So it was my way of getting those things later in life. All the parts that of my education I didn't get.
Okay.
That being said, so yes, I have a bunch of musical instruments. And
but none that you think you're good at?
Not really. I mean, the best probably I was at the recorder. But my son is a million times better than me at, like, say, the piano.
Okay.
He's amazing.
Okay.
So I can see in my children,
right,
oh, I'm so glad that they were exposed. And of course, when you homeschool, you get that too.
Right. Well, that's the hope.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because one of the reasons for homeschooling for us has always been kind of what you just said. A lot of that, the embarrassment or the going inside because you're scared to show who you are. And I think being in a public school setting, we both went to public school. We know what that's like. I mean, it's like there's a lot of that. You feel pressured. You feel, well, if I really am myself and this guy's going to make fun of me, or that girl's not going to like me, or whatever, right? And you end up getting kind of pigeonholed into this person who you probably really aren't, but it's just kind of who you become because you have to fit in, or you're trying to fit in with everybody else. And I think through homeschooling, you don't get as much of that, but you still get it. I mean, if you're going to do even the co-ops, or even, like the thing that what you call EA or whatever. I mean, they're going and they're being around all these other kids. Thankfully, most of them are more like not public school kind of kids, so a lot of them are more free to, I always used to say there's things called Civil War balls. Did you ever hear of these?
Yes.
Okay, so my kids my older two used to go to these all the time when they were younger, and I used to sit in there, and people laugh at me, but I would sit in there and I watch all these awkward homeschool kids, because that's one thing I always says, oh, you can't homeschool your kids because they'll be socially awkward, blah, 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 right? But I'm sitting there and I'm watching them, and I'm going, this is great. I love this. I love that these kids are not worried about what anybody's going to think. They're just having a good time. I loved it. I thought it was great, where other people would sit there and go, oh, look at these nerds. What a bunch of dorks, like, man, boy, they're socially awkward. But I'm like, yeah, but they're themselves. What's the two options? You either be yourself and maybe you're a little socially awkward, but at least you're yourself, or what? You pretend to be something you're not so you can fit in with a certain group. Mm-hmm. I would rather have my kids be the weirdo who's themselves than, you know what I mean, than the guy I was trying to be in high school and stuff, trying to be like this guy or that guy and trying to, you know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of the benefit to that. But so did you say that you sing some too? Did you start to say that?
Well, in a Waldorf school, you have to sing every day.
Oh, okay.
So
it's
every
forced
morning.
upon you.
Well, no, it's a main lesson, and I was the main lesson teacher. Mm-hmm. And starting in 1st through 8th grade, you have a main lesson teacher, and ideally the teacher stays with the children all 8 years. So you develop a connection. And
so the same teacher with the same kids from like kindergarten through 8th grade kind of thing?
1st through 8th.
1st through 8th, okay.
Because it's 7-year cycles, so 0 to 7, 7 to 14.
Okay.
It's very detailed, and the depth of it is just amazing. That's why, and it's Eurythmy is part of it too.
Oh, okay.
That's part of the Waldorf education.
And that's where you first learned that? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But back when I knew you, I wasn't a Waldorf teacher, but I was going to grad school in July in New Hampshire to study. And that's why I was so excited.
Okay.
To go, and I had this little space between I graduated from college and that's where I was. Okay. And I was going to Santa Barbara. There's a Waldorf school there, and I was taking Eurythmy classes, and that's why I would come back and do Eurythmy.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. I mean, that's really cool that you would be so open.
I was learning about it.
Right.
Then.
Right.
And so it's part. So in the main lesson, you have it's base, and then Waldorf education is head, heart, and hands. Mm-hmm. So in a regular school, you're mostly focusing on head, academics, and sports, jock, will, and the heart part, which is the art, is missing. So Waldorf is a balance of all three: thinking, feeling, and willing.
Okay.
And the main lesson,
willing was the last one.
The will is the
willing.
Is like the physical activity, movement. So every human being has something that they're stronger in or they're weaker in. So the whole point is balancing.
Okay.
All of those, and in the education too, there's another part of it. So going into main lesson, the first part of it is the circle, which is the movement part.
Okay.
So in first grade, you're going to have 20, 30 minutes of your, and main lesson is 2 hours long. You're going to have a big chunk you're moving, but you're hand clapping your times tables. I'm sorry, I'm doing so much education, but you're doing a lot of movement. You're singing the times tables like 3, 6, 9, 12, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. You know.
Yeah, but that doesn't rhyme.
It doesn't matter. 24 and 27, 24 and 27, 30, 33, 36, 30, 33, 36. And then you do it to, then you do it to time, clapping with your neighbor, and, you play all these games. And so in the circle, they're learning, and you're reciting poems and singing songs. You're singing songs in different languages.
Yeah.
And so, but as the children grow older, they still do circle, even in 8th grade. So we're doing things that are more complicated. Like we're getting sticks and walking, and we're bouncing balls and throwing at each other across the room and reciting verses at the same time. And so it gets really intense. It's probably shorter in 8th grade, but we're getting our recorders out and playing songs, and we're singing the song. And that's the first part of main lesson in a Waldorf school. So yes, we sing every day.
Okay.
Or we're learning history. So we're learning the French Revolution. So we're learning the French, songs of that time. And so we're integrating everything. And it changes every month, the songs and the music.
Okay.
So it's all integrated.
And have you ever, as a teacher, gotten to work with the same children for 7 years? Or?
No, I did 1st through 3rd in Hawaii. And then I did 6th through 8th in Sacramento. And then I took another 7th grade, 8th grade combo. At that point, I got married and pregnant, and I never went back. Okay. So I haven't been in a Waldorf school.
Okay. So what you're doing now, it's not really Waldorf, it's more...
Well, I originally, when I chose to homeschool, I did so because I wanted to do Waldorf education, and there wasn't any around here. So I do Waldorf education homeschool. Okay. But it's not the same, because my kids, now that they're older, they don't even want to do singing or main lesson.
Okay, that's what I was going to kind of ask you, and so I'll kind of... So for myself, I have, as long as I can remember, and I don't think I remember back to like kindergarten or 1st grade, but I have memories of like 2nd, 3rd grade. As long as I can remember, I've always hated doing anything like in front of other people, as far as singing or even like hand movements that you got to do to certain musical songs and that kind of stuff. It's always made me feel uncomfortable, and that's carried through to today. Like I just don't like, it's just a problem, even to where I see other people do it. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, and I start to judge others, which I shouldn't do. But I mean, my point is, like, what you were saying is, like, for most kids, when they start early in that kind of a program, that most of them are open to that, and they're fine. Right, exactly. But I mean, as they grow, in theory, let's say you had a schoolhouse out in a little town somewhere, and there was like nobody. And it was just like a town of 100 people. And all these kids started doing the Waldorf school when they were like 1st grade, and they went through, and then they're adults. In theory, would they be the kind of people, none of them you think would be the kind of people that would be like, oh, I don't want to sing, or I don't want to do, you think that'd all be like...
If you meet people who have gone through the Waldorf school, they're very much do they go to the beat of their own drum.
Okay.
So they're all different, but they can just, oh yeah, I can draw that for you. Or they just have all these gifts and talents. I can do this garden for you. I mean, they're very unique.
Okay.
And that's the whole point.
Right.
And I think it's part of the class culture. So it's just what you do. You don't even think it's weird because everybody does it.
Right.
And they don't really even think about it.
Okay.
They go through their phases. 7th grade gets a little bit hard, but then they get out of it in 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So
but when like you're talking about like your kids now, and now their guys are getting older, they're kind of not wanting to do that stuff anymore. Do you think that's more because of just the culture that's around them, even though they're getting kind of that schooling from you in a sense, but they're still getting the culture influence also, so that hinders all of that? They
don't, because in a Waldorf school, that's the culture. They do a play. Every class does a play every year. Every month the kids get up each class and do a performance, a song, so it's part of just what everybody does. But unfortunately in the homeschool community, we don't do enough of that, I think. And so my kids start to realize that they don't do what everybody else does.
Right.
So
yes.
they don't want to do it.
See, and that's unfortunate. It's just that's a sad thing, I think, to me, because I think, even though I know nothing about Waldorf school before sitting down with you today, I do believe that I think each person is unique. Like each person is an individual person that nobody on the planet is exactly like them. But then as we grow up in this society, in this culture, we start to get molded into what everybody else is, right? And that uniqueness is still going to be there because it's a part of your core being. But you start to like conform to other people and to what society says is the norm and what you're supposed to look like and you're supposed to sound like, and you know what I mean? It's just sad. It's a bummer. And I hope, I don't really have high hopes, to be honest with you, that we'll ever get to a place where we can go back to that. But I mean, I think that it starts in childhood. Right.
And like, I do see it with my children, but at the same time, and I have to say this about homeschooling, I feel like the kids that are homeschooled have a really strong foundation in who they are.
Right.
I do see that. I do see that. No, are they Waldorf kids all? Obviously not. But every family brings their values to their children, and you can see that, and I think it's beautiful.
Right.
And when they're in a school system, I think sometimes it's more monoculture.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But in the homeschool community, I feel like the children are strong in who they are.
I agree with you. That's why I've always thought, so I mean, I had my own critique of the home. I dated a homeschool girl when I was like in probably a freshman or sophomore in high school. And I hated it. Like, I felt like, because I was a totally different person back then, but I was like, this is dumb. Like, your mom doesn't let you do this or listen to this, or because they were like a religious kind of, family, and it was like everything was off limits. It seemed like to me everything was off limits. And I even, and some of the other homeschool kids I knew, I was looked at, I'm like, boy, that's always the weird kid is the homeschool. It's always the weirdo, right? But then now as an adult and seeing, my own kids in that way, and Bethany and I we kind of came to the homeschooling thing pretty early on. I mean, we kind of had thoughts like, maybe like junior high school, we'll start homeschooling because we were worried about things that happen in junior high and high school. But then our daughter our oldest did public school, kindergarten and first grade, and she came home from first grade one time. So, how was school, honey? And she says, well, I'm bored. Well, you're bored? What do you mean you're bored? She goes, well, she says, I understand all of this, but I have to sit there for hours while the teacher tries to explain it to all the other kids that don't get it. And that was when we realized, okay, she's being held back intellectually and academically because of this public school system. So we pulled her out and started homeschooling then. And because of the beauty of homeschooling is you can spend more time where it needs to be, because every kid is individual, right? Some kids are going to have a harder time with math than English, vice versa. All our kids, we have 4 kids, they're all totally different in their skills and their strengths and weaknesses. So in homeschooling, you can say, okay, she's having a harder time with math, but she's nailing English. Like she's like reading at a 6th grade level when she's in 2nd grade. She's doing great. But math, she's struggling. So let's spend more time on math, right? So you can kind of custom it to each person. So that's the beauty of that too. But I mean, But yeah, so anyway, like I used to feel that way and think, oh, that I don't want my kids to be as weirdo homeschool. But that was the 15-year-old me, to where, you know, by the time I was 22, when we first started homeschooling my daughter,
wow,
it was like, you know, okay, I see this differently now. And as I was around more and more homeschool kids, and then around more and more public school kids, I started thinking to myself, I'm glad my kids are being homeschooled. I don't want them to be like this anymore. I don't need them to be the captain of the football team or the head cheerleader. Like that kind of stuff used to be something you're like, oh yeah, I want them to be popular and have all the... No, I don't want them to be that at all anymore, you know? So it's kind of like your mindset changes, I think, as we get older, but...
Mm-hmm. No, I never knew anybody who homeschooled when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell my kids, if people say they're weird just means that weird just means they don't understand you,
mm-hmm.
and that's okay.
Right.
Like if somebody says you're weird, I mean, I've been told I was weird, obviously, in my life, and I'm take it as a compliment, and take it as, oh, I guess that person doesn't understand something, and that's okay.
I'm higher than them. I'm at a level that they don't understand yet.
I don't think of it like that, but I think of it. They just, instead of taking it as an insult, I take it as, oh, they just don't understand, and that's okay.
Sure. Well, I would always tell my kids, but I would always tell my kids, well, weird is just the opposite of normal. So first you have to define what normal means, which is almost impossible, because really when you try to define normal, all you're doing, especially in a societal sense, all you're doing is, well, what are most people like? So then that becomes the norm. But who's to say that's the right way? That doesn't mean it's the right way. It's just the way everybody's doing things, right? You can go to other societies where maybe they throw their third baby into the volcano to appease some god and say, well, that's normal over there.
Mm-hmm.
But does that mean it's not? Does that mean it's right? It's like, no, not necessarily. You know,
it's average. And why?
Right.
My French teacher in high school used to say, "Why would anybody want to be average?"
Mm-hmm.
I think of normal as average.
Right. Yeah.
I've never wanted to be normal or average.
Right. You want to be above
not
average.
Above
what they
it,
say.
but just find what's really right or resonates with me,
mm-hmm.
and that might not be what's right or what resonates with others, but that's okay.
Right.
I have to do what's right. For me.
Now, did you in your own life, did you ever go through any phases though where you were like trying to be like not that, like not kind of the abnormal thing? Like was there ever a point in your life where you're like
trying to be abnormal?
Yeah. I mean not that you were trying to be, but I mean was there ever a point in your life where you're like, well, I don't want to totally be myself because I want to fit in with the popular crowd, or I want these people to like me, or like, do you feel like your whole life you just been like, no, I am who I am, deal with me, this is it?
No, I think even today I'm careful. Like I said, I'm careful about what I say. I'm
mm-hmm.
still myself, but I know that who I am is, I mean, maybe everybody feels this way. You have to just, I'm careful. I don't say what I think always because I don't want to be offensive to people, mm-hmm. because I know that maybe I have unique perspectives like we all do.
Right.
So I've always been careful, but I'm careful.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean I'm not who I am. And I kind of, like my husband says, you always do whatever you want anyway, so just do what you want.
You eventually get there anyway. You might as well just start there.
So he's always just like, I'm like, well, do you think this is a good idea? He's like, he's like, do whatever you want. You do whatever you want.
Oh, I got you.
Kind of thing.
He's like, why are you even asking me my opinion? I know what you're going to do. So
Right. So I try to like fit in as
mm-hmm.
much as I can. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think my dad is a little bit like that. He does what my dad's very... Well, when I was a little girl, my aunt said he was a nonconformist.
Oh, boy.
And, and he also was an entrepreneur. And so when you have your own business and you have your own ideas, and he mm-hmm. doesn't really care who he offends.
Right.
I hate to say that, but it's true. I mean, he's just, that's what he thinks. And, And,
well, I think so I understand what you're saying is not wanting to. I mean, nobody really wants to offend people just for the sake of offending people. But I also think we've gotten to such a point now as a society where we almost can't say anything anymore without somebody being offended. I mean, I was just talking about that this morning with a friend about like stand-up comedy. right? Like back in the 70s, 80s, probably even 90s, there was just the comedians, they made fun of everybody. They just made fun of things. They made fun of life. They made fun of themselves. They made fun of certain people groups, and it was funny, and we all laughed, thought it was good. Now, it's like certain comedians can say something about a people group or something, and it's like, oh, we're gonna get rid of this guy. He can't host this award show. He can't do this. We're gonna not let him work in Hollywood anymore. And it's just like they have to worry about that now, to where I understand, like, if it's a personal offense, like to use the stand-up comedy as an example. If someone's a stand-up comedian and I'm at the show and I'm in the audience and he specifically points at my wife and starts making jokes about her personally and saying derogatory things against her personally, I'm going to be offended by that, right? But if he's making a broad joke about my wife's in her early 40s, so it'd be like, he makes a broad joke about mid or early 40-year-old white women or something, I'm not going to be offended by that because he's not, or even like me, let's say he's making a joke about middle-aged white men. I'm not going to be offended by that because it's not personal attack to me. Mm-hmm. But if he looks at me and says, hey, Ryan, you're this, you're that, and he starts saying all these things, you see what I'm saying? So there's a difference to me between personal offense and like offending a people group that I might be a part of. It's like, and I wish we could get back to where it's like, why can't we make jokes about stuff like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like it's sad when we have to tiptoe around everybody. And
I know it really is. And that's why I said yes to this conversation, because I think it is important that we talk about things that are hard to talk about. I think we're not going to grow or we're not going to get any better as a culture and society until we start doing that. And honestly, I don't know how it's really going to happen. Like I said, I don't like to be, because I have a job. Before I had this job, I was a little bit more out there.
Sure. But that's what's sad, that now you have to worry about it because of the job you have, that you're not allowed to say what you think anymore because...
It's not that anybody tells me that. I just want everybody to feel welcome and comfortable. And
right.
I don't want to offend anybody, but you know what I'm saying? It's kind of a culture of just being warm and supportive and welcoming, and so to do that, it's not so much about what I think, it's about creating a space so that like students can unfold and families can unfold. Do you know what I'm saying? Yes,
but then the other side of that is if there's somebody that's like, I guess I feel like yes, I understand what you're saying, to be welcome to everybody, but there's always going to be somebody that is upset, right? Like let's talk about like some certain curriculum, right? Let's say if you're in a classroom and let's say there's, and this is going to get a little political here, but I mean, there's like some of the stuff they're fighting over in some of the other states about what's in the school libraries, some very graphic LGBT literature or things of that nature, right? And some of the families are like, I do not want my kid being exposed to that, right? Other families, maybe families in the LGBT community, are like, no, it needs to be in the school because my people group needs to be known. They need to have that voice in the school system. So now you're a teacher or you're a principal or you're a superintendent of that school district. So now you have a decision to make. Right. You can either leave it there, and then you're going to leave this half of the group ticked off because they might potentially pull their kids out of that school because they don't want their kids exposed to that. Or you can remove it from the school library, and now you have this side's ticked off at you because they feel like you're discriminating against their group.
But if it's sexually explicit, things, then obviously it doesn't matter what it is. You just
it shouldn't be in there
anyway. It's a non-issue.
Okay. So what if? Okay. So let's remove the sexual nature. Let's just say it's a book about a gay couple. There's no sex in it. There's no nudity. There's no anything. It's just literally two men that are a couple. And the whole story is about that, right? Now, there's people that would say, I don't want my kids exposed to that, Now, then there's another side would say, well, that's ridiculous. They're just who they are. But see, by saying that, that's a stance, right? This stance over here says, I don't agree with that. I don't want my kids exposed to that. Then the other side says, no, you're dumb. You're ridiculous. Love is love. Let people have their relationship or whatever. So now what do you do?
It's just I feel like it's just an agenda, and it's just there to distract us from things that are really
could be
important. I mean,
could be.
Why are we fighting over things like that? I mean, a certain percentage of the population has always been gay. I don't know, it's like 10%. It's just how it is. And so now it's like, why do we have to like, I mean, even if a person is heterosexual, we're not going to go make out in front of, you know, in a school. So like, it's just part of things. I feel like there's just so much attention drawn there when there's so many other issues. Like the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and all the things that they're doing right now to take away our rights as a society. And when we're so distracted with these, you know, issues that, I mean, like a person's sexuality, that's such a personal thing. Like, I don't care. Like, really? Like, so great. Good for that family and good for this family. Like, I don't really care that much about those topics. And I think that the media, it's just putting all this out there and distracting us. Well, they're taking away our rights, our constitutional rights, our basic human rights. And these are the things, and you know, mass vaccination, taking away your jobs if you refuse to do this. I mean, to inject your body with unknown substances. I mean, if we can't say no to what's injected into our bodies, then we're slaves. And when our society has gotten to the point where everybody goes in the store with a mask, and I wouldn't do that, and you know, and I would get such anxiety before I had to go into a store because I knew, oh gosh, brace yourself. How am I going to, I'm going to get kicked out of the store today. You know? And so it's like, these are basic human rights. And when we're so distracted with like what somebody's doing in their bedroom, because the media is putting in our face constantly and like putting in our children's education, maybe they are, they aren't, I don't know. I hear that that's like a thing, and I can see different points, but to me, honestly, I don't care about that. I care about my rights and my children's rights for the future. And I'm with you. Like I would say, so boy, we got a bunch of stuff now. You said a bunch of stuff we can talk about. I know, but that's what I usually don't. No, that's awesome though. So I mean, as far as like the LGBT stuff, I mean, I'm with you. We always use the terms, what someone does in their bedroom is up to them, and I completely agree. I don't think the government or me or anybody has the right to tell somebody, as long as it's consensual, right? That's the stipulation. If two people are consensual and they're both adults and they want to do whatever they want in the bedroom sexually, hey, that's between you guys. You do whatever you're going to do, right? But I think when it becomes more of a public thing is when things like that happen, where there's a school that maybe has books in their library, and again, I'm not talking about sexually explicit at this point. That is happening, but for the sake of this discussion right here, I'm not going to throw that in there. I'm just talking about, like I said, just a book that has to do with a gay couple. So now that's out there in the library, that's kind of out of the bedroom now, right? That's in the public school system. My kids are being exposed to that potentially now. So now it becomes an issue that I may fall on either side of the fence. I might fall and say, oh, I'm all for this. I think this is great. I think kids should be exposed to this more so they're more accepting of this lifestyle of the LGBT community. And that's what I believe. But maybe there's another side that says, I don't believe that that's something I want my kids exposed to. I don't want that to be normalized for my children. So as a principal or a superintendent, you can't please both sides there. You're never going to please both sides.
Exactly.
And I think if a book is on a shelf, I mean, how many people even read anymore?
True.
Honestly?
True.
And if it's in a school and you have a problem with that, then I would say don't put your kids in that school.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right. But what if like 80% of the school said that? Then the superintendent's going to have a problem on his hands, isn't he? Because he can't afford to lose 80% of his students. So then he's going to have to say, well, maybe I'll get rid of these books. Right. So I'm with you. Like parents, I work at the library, and I'm always trying to raise awareness about the books that are in the library. Because parents say, parents should be deciding what their kids are allowed to read. I believe that. I think that's true. Mm-hmm. But my issue is I think a lot of parents don't realize what's over there. They're uninformed that when I have a 13-year-old girl come into the library with her mom or whoever, maybe by herself, and she says, oh, I'm a 13-year-old girl, where's the section that you would recommend for me to read some fiction? Mm-hmm. So I'm supposed to send her over to the young adult section, okay, which is like 13 to 17 is the age bracket in there. Mm-hmm. Well, there are, not all of them, but there are certain books in that section that are explicitly sexual. Mm-hmm. Explicitly, like describing sex acts in detail. Mm-hmm. And this is where I'm supposed to send a 13-year-old girl. So I'm always just trying to raise awareness of the fact that if the parents know that's over there and they decide to let their kids read that, hey, that's totally up to the parents. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, I at least want you to know it's over there, because I was shocked to find that out myself. And I was reading this thinking to myself, there's no way in a million years I would let my daughter read this when she's 13. There's nowhere. Oh, I don't remember. It's a bunch of series. Like there's a, oh man, I don't remember.
Vampire series?
One of them was a vampire series. It wasn't Twilight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Twilight isn't bad.
Okay.
I mean, there's a relationship in there, obviously, but I mean, I don't think it's graphic in any way. But it's, some of the more ones that weren't necessarily made into movies, book series, but are still very popular with the young adult crowd, And now we're in the age of graphic novels. So now we have, not only that, we have pictures to go along with a lot of this stuff too, which makes it even worse. So anyway, I mean, I think parents should be in control of that for sure. Even in a public school where they're like, that's in the library. There's certain books in the libraries. Now I can tell my kid, hey, just don't check that book out. But I mean, what do kids normally do when they're, I mean, it's like, it's just the nature of the beast to be like, oh, that's the one thing you don't want me to do? Why do I feel a strong urge to do that one thing that you told me not to? You know what I mean? It's like it's like an urge there. So anyway, what were you going to say?
I don't remember.
Sorry.
No, it doesn't matter. I don't remember.
Okay.
That's okay. Yeah, I don't know. To me, I mean, the homosexual, I don't like that they put this transgender agenda in the education for children that are so young.
Okay.
But I've heard a little bit of the reasoning behind it, and I don't agree with it. So my kids aren't in that system.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yes. And I think as parents, that's what we need to do. We need to be informed, right? We need to know what's going on. And I think that's why a lot of since you brought that up, the transgender, a lot of, like in Tennessee and some other states, they're going through this battle because of the gender affirming care of some of the puberty blockers, the surgeries that they're transitioning from a male to a female or vice versa. And in a lot of those situations, the school systems are trying to do so without the parents' knowledge. Because they're trying to say, well, but this girl's parents they don't believe that she's a boy. Even though she says she's a boy, her parents are refusing to call her a boy. They're refusing to treat her as a boy. So therefore, they're oppressing this little girl. So we need to get the parents out of the way so we can help this little girl transition into a boy, because that's what's right? That's her right as a child. I'm thinking she's 13. Right? Like, I mean, if you're 20 and you want to transition, hey, that's up to you.
I don't have any problem with I have no problem at all with adults that make decisions for themselves.
Absolutely.
But I feel like when we're dealing with children and we're dealing with decisions they can make without parental consent that could affect them for the rest of their lives, I completely disagree with that.
Right. I do too.
So that's my concern. And I feel like the states here often is trying to push legislation that takes away parental rights, whether it's vaccinations or whether it's transgender operations and drugs.
Right.
I am strongly against that.
Okay.
Do you know?
Oh yeah. So what you're saying is you think parents should be involved? completely...
Parents are there for a reason.
Yes.
And I know there's I think it's a federal law. I know last summer I worked on this a lot with my doctor, whose license has been taken away.
Uh-oh. That's not good.
It's not good.
Oh, man.
So I worked with her and a group of others last summer in California because they were trying to push so much legislation that took away parental rights. And so we worked on that last summer.
And trying to get that not to happen, like reverse it, or? Trying
to stop the bad bills. And I know that there's a federal case in, I think, Washington, D.C. I think it's federal, that set a precedent that was used so that they couldn't pass some of for parental consent. So you can't say that children need parents on one hand, but then they can make their own decisions without
right. Right, exactly.
So you have to figure it out.
Yeah.
So there is a precedent in Washington that was used to stop some of those bills that basically are trying to take away parental rights. So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with you completely, and I think that's a huge, scary thing. Like, that shouldn't be the issue.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be the issue because it is the issue, but parents need to. But I mean, see, but that can go too far too, because parents can be bad parents, and they can abuse their children, so they shouldn't have the right to do that.
No.
So that parents should be stopped. But see, that's where the gray line comes in, because these people that are opposed to.
How many parents are bad parents, though?
I don't know.
I don't think it's that. I mean,
right. It's probably not the majority.
And do we want the state to make decisions for our children,
right,
or parents?
Well, but what I'm saying, if there's a situation, let's say, where the parents are drug addicts and they're abusing physically, sexually, whatever, their children, we would probably all agree and say, no, at that point, we do want the government to come in and say, we got to get those kids out of there because they're being abused. Right?
Right.
So in the case of the transgender thing, the proponents of this gender affirming care would say those parents are abusing this child by not affirming the gender that they prefer. So they're saying it's abuse.
Yeah, but that just goes into how crazy has our society.
I know, I'm with you. Yes, completely.
Where we can let children basically sterilize themselves when they don't know better.
Right.
And it's that's just letting children hurt themselves.
Yes.
In this crazy idea that they'll grow out, they'll probably grow out of, or potentially grow out of, because the percentage of people who are actually transgender versus this fad, because it's promoted by our media and our culture. Right. It's insanity.
Yes.
And it's just a sign of how how lost society is, I think.
So what would you say to people that would say there's always been this many transgender people?
Well, it's not reality. It's not true.
They've just been hiding for all these years, because now that they're more accepted, they're able to come out and be who they are.
I think if it's promoted way too much in the media. Yeah. And so you can't say that, because the media has power. You go back to Bernays and the studies that have done of mind control, back in when they first started using media. Right. So we know it has an influence on them. Sure. And you can't discount that. That's a factor. Right. But I mean, honestly, I love all people. So if that's who somebody is, then I'm fine with that. Right. But I do feel like it's being promoted by our media and it's being promoted. Right. And so it's going to look at how when you use media to push things, TV and advertising. I mean, it's part of that. So you can't discount that. Right. Propaganda, they used to call it back in the day, right? Yeah. Yes, it's propaganda. I think Edward Bernays did studies on it. Yeah. I couldn't remember, but yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think our society and the thinking that's happening is pretty wackadoodle. Yeah. In a lot of ways, Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I love all humans, so it's not like I'm not gonna love somebody if that's what their thing is. Sure. I do. Like I said, I mean, personally, it's not my thing, and I don't. I see it's being promoted. Right. But again, so I'm with you. I say, well, I love all people, and if they're adults and that's the way they want to live their lives, and I've said this a million times, but if there's a biological male who's an adult who wants to live his life as a female
and say he's a female. I don't think he really is a female, but I support his right to believe that. I support his right to live that way if he wants. Doesn't mean I don't love the guy. I respect, I mean, I will protect the guy. I will help him in any way. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I can disagree with his lifestyle. But we're in a culture now that if you disagree with someone's lifestyle, it means you hate them. Like a lot of people can't fathom the idea that you could love somebody while at the same time disagreeing with something they're doing that makes them happy.
Right.
And I'm like, there's a disconnect there because it's like, why can't that? I mean, I know that can be true because it's true of my own life. But these people would say to me, no, Ryan, you don't really love them then. You hate them. You hate the trans community. You hate the gay community. No, I do not. I do not. I've talked with people in these communities. I love these people, but no different than someone sitting across the table from me and saying, well, Ryan, I disagree with you on your stance on this. I wouldn't sit there and say, oh, you must hate me then. To me, that's idiotic.
It is, and I think it's just another sign of our culture and how it's disintegrated.
Yes.
I mean, we can't even talk about things. People don't even think for themselves. They just regurgitate what they see on TV half the time.
Right.
And you can try to reason with them, and you realize after so many conversations that it's futile.
Right.
And it's actually a waste of the breath.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a thing, I've said this before on here, but there's a little thing I kept saying ever, find your voice. Find your voice. Find your voice. And I get what it means. I understand what they're saying. They're saying, well, speak out. You know, find your place. Find what you have to say. And I'm like, I just don't like the word voice. Find your voice. Because everybody has a voice, right? You just said it. Media, pushing, people, everything. Voice. We got all these voices. Nobody thinking for themselves. It's just parroting what everyone else is saying. I'm like, find your brain. That's what you need to find. Find your ability to research, to look into things, to come up with your own opinions on things, right? Sure, listen to what people say to you. Take in that information, but don't just assume because he's a guy that you like that he's saying what's right? This is true in politics too. People will pick a candidate that they like, and they will go 100% in to the point that if you say anything bad about that guy, they get mad at you. Or you say, well, can you believe this guy said this? I can't. Oh, well, that's not what he meant. And they start defending it. It's like, no, just why can't you just say, yes, I voted for this guy. I like some of the things he did. Do I agree with everything he said? No, I don't. But it's like, it's either all or nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Either he's Satan or he's Jesus, right? It's got to be one or the other. It's like, why can't he just be a normal dude who's made some mistakes, but's also done some good things as well? You know? So, I mean, so to me, and that's, and one of the things I've always told my kids, if you could learn anything from me, if you forget everything else I've ever taught you in life, one thing you learn from me is look into things for yourself. Research, study, go in with an open mind, right? Be willing to change your opinion if the evidence contradicts what you believe. Take the truth over your own thoughts every time, right? Like, you know.
That's so good. That to me is education. That's it. To be able to do that,
right?
Then you know that your kids have had a good education.
Assuming they listen.
Right.
Right? That's the hard part.
That's what I really want for my kids too. It's
Yeah.
like that they can think for themselves and figure things out.
Right. Yes.
I tell them a lot of stuff, and I hope they listen, but
Right.
at the same time,
Right.
it's like you want to trust that they get it.
Yes. Right. And I've even told them even things I tell them. I say even things check it out. Make sure it's true. Because I'm a fallible human also. I'm going to say things that aren't true. I'm going to believe things that aren't true in certain points in my life. Check it out. You know? So,
Right.
I mean, yeah.
That's good.
So let's go into some of this stuff. Well, real quick though, because we didn't really touch on this. Do you have any, before we get into, I want to talk about what you said about Bill Gates and about about the
World Economic Forum.
just taking away our rights and stuff. But is there any like music you like to listen to? Like,
No.
do you, well, anytime, even throughout your life.
I
is there...
have Spotify now.
Okay. So what kind of stuff do you like to listen to on there?
Oh gosh. Well, and I also, I got a car and it has this thing on it. I think it's Sirius. So then I can listen to
Sirius FM. Uh-huh.
Yes. So I like to listen to the 70s. And
Okay.
The 60s and.
It's like classic rock and disco or what?
Classic rock.
Classic rock.
Yeah. But even 70s from the songs that were playing on the radio when I was a little girl.
Okay. Is that because it's nostalgic?
Nostalgia.
Okay.
and I don't know. I like a little bit the Red Hot Chili Pepper station.
Nice. That's a good one.
And then, and I like some of the. Well, I don't like their bluegrass station, but I like some of the bluegrass.
Okay.
From just being at different concerts in Alaska. I think I liked U2.
Okay.
I liked some classical sometimes, like Beethoven, Pastoral Sonata.
Okay.
My parents listened to a lot of oldies but goodies when I was younger, so
like Motown kind of stuff and that.
Yeah, just all of it.
Okay.
Like Sam Cooke, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see, U2. I liked U2 in college. Oh, but I really like Jack Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah.
There's one like I think it's Where'd All the Good People Go or something like that.
Okay. That's a song?
I like that song.
Okay. I'm not real familiar with him, but I love Jack I've heard
Johnson.
some.
So he was in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
So when I went to UCSB, he was there a little bit later, I think. But I like a lot of the bands I like. They're just really not really that. I don't know. They're more like bluegrass and.
Okay. Do you like country or just bluegrass?
I do like country lately, but in high school I hated it.
Me too. But that was a different time. Like, and this has come up so many times on this podcast, but it's like back when we were in high school, there was cliques, even when it came to music. Like most people back then only liked one kind of music. It was like, oh, I'm a heavy metal guy, or I'm a hip hop guy, or I'm a country guy.
That was it.
You know, and even if you heard a country song, and you're like, oh, I kind of like that Garth Brooks song. It's like you couldn't say that out loud, because then your metalhead friends be like, what? What's next? You're gonna buy some Spurs and Wranglers and start walking around in a cowboy hat? Like, what's the deal? You know. Yes. But now, most people you ask now that were maybe 10 years after us, most of them will say, oh, I like a little bit of everything.
Right.
It's more broad now. And I think that's a lot of that is because so much music started to merge. Like there started to become like these bands that were like rap rock, you know, like Limp Bizkit and Kid Rock. And like some of these guys were coming out where it was like rap music, but it was like with guitars and like, it was like, what is this? So, I mean, and that's kind of where I'm at now today. Cause I used to be only hip hop back in like high school.
Oh yeah.
You know,
this song came on in the Sirius. It was like DJ Quik Tonight.
Nice. Yes. Yes.
That was like our Saturday.
Oh my gosh, you know? Dude, that keyboard at the beginning. Do, 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 do. It's the best. And I hear that and it takes me right back, man. It's like, oh, this is so good.
Yes.
But see, I mean, rap back then was so much better.
I know.
In my opinion. I think a lot of the new stuff is just awful. I mean, in everything, it's just there's a couple that shine through, but
oh gosh, back then I used to always play like, do you know? Is it Jermaker? Do you remember that song? Jermaker. It's by who sings All of My Love? Oh, Led Zeppelin? No. Yeah, I think it was Led Zeppelin. Jermaker. It's Dire
Oh,
Maker.
Yes.
Dire Maker.
I never knew that's how it was pronounced.
Well, I don't even know if that's how it's
Okay,
pronounced.
it looks like Dire Maker.
Dire Maker.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I used to play that over and over in my car all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
I liked you too.
I love Led Zeppelin.
Oh yeah.
That's good stuff back then. So what's some of the classic rock bands that you were a big fan of? Besides Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin. Oh God, who's the one that I Was Born a Rambling Man?
Allman Brothers.
Allman Brothers.
Yeah.
Lynyrd Skynyrd a little bit.
Love Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Mostly I got into that more in college because everybody listened to classic rock. But I did do Led Zeppelin in high school, and I remember people that used to drive in my car. I'd give people rides all the time, and they'd say, "Why?" Like that song would come on, the Dire Maker song. They're like, and then people would be like, "Oh no," and they're like, "That's a good song. What's wrong with it?" And they're like, "Well, she just plays it over and over."
Oh yeah, they're like, "We've heard this before."
Probably like it was good the first 50 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I liked that in high school.
That's funny because usually it's like the most well-known Zeppelin song is "Stairway to Heaven."
Oh, really?
And everybody what have you seen? Remember the movie Wayne's World?
Yes, but I didn't like it.
Oh no.
I liked Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm not sure how those are connected. How you made that connection just now?
Because they came out at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Everybody talked about Wayne's World, and I saw it, and I thought, oh, this is a good movie. But I'm like, why do people like Edward Scissorhands that way?
Well, that's probably in my top 5 favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, it's good.
I love it, and even now, like watching it as an adult, and just it's so moving. You know my favorite part in the whole movie is when it's getting towards the end and everything's happening with Winona Ryder's boyfriend's like going crazy and Edward's running away from all of them and he's in the house and he comes home and Winona Ryder's there and she puts her arms around him And she says, hold me. And he says, I can't. It's just like, it just hits me every time. It's like, oh my gosh, he wants to put his arms around this girl, but he can't because he has scissors on his hands. Mm-hmm. Horrible, you know? But you see all the Beauty and the Beast. Did you know that was like a modern telling of Beauty and the Beast?
I did not know.
Yeah. Next time you watch it, you'll notice. Because like, think about it, like the boyfriend's like the Gaston character. Even to the end where they're up in a thing and he ends up accidentally killing him and he falls off the thing, and remember the whole thing, and like, and everybody, they're all against this monster who's Edward, yet he's this gentle, caring guy. He just looks like a freak, right? So everybody's scared of him, but when they get to know him, they realize he's not a bad guy, right? Yeah, it's a total Beauty and the Beast.
I like Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorites too.
Mm-hmm.
And also like Little Mermaid, back in the day, you know,
right.
back in that day.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Gaston, my kids will laugh because we joke about Gaston all the time.
Oh, really?
We're like, yes.
From the Disney movie or the?
From the Disney movie.
Okay. The animated or the?
Huh?
The animated one, the original animated, or the new one with the actors?
I'm not going to say, but it's just.
That's forbidden territory.
We know somebody who's Gaston.
Oh, I see.
We always joke about
it. Becomes personal.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We know somebody who's just like Gaston.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're always like, joking about it.
That's awesome. Oh man. Boy. So Germakers. Yeah, I wonder if that's how you say it.
Da, 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 da,
yeah.
Da. I don't even know how you say it. In fact, my friends tell me, because I've read a lot in my life, that I'll say words and they're like, you're a reader, because I say it and it's incorrect because I never heard it, I only read it. So I say it how it looks
on the page, but you've never heard it audibly.
And so because it's D, that apostrophe Y-E-R,
yeah.
To me that's Germaker, like Ger.
Okay.
But maybe it's Diremaker, I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows?
Maybe it's like something not even close to that.
I don't know.
Maybe it's like Overmaker or something, and it's like doesn't make any sense.
Oh, and then I was thinking, because I read that a little bit, and so when I was growing up, my parents, they didn't really listen to Mexican music, but they did listen to that Linda Ronstadt, that Canciones de Mi Padre. So I kind of grew up like at family stuff, like listening to that, and then yeah, and then when I was older, in Waldorf schools, when we do Eurythmy, sometimes we do it to poetry and words, but sometimes we do it to music, and they always have a live pianist there.
Okay.
And so a lot of classical music, and you get to know the difference between Beethoven and Mozart, and you know, just by listening and moving to it.
Yeah.
And so I really loved Beethoven.
Okay.
Like when we did Eurythmy, and especially the Pastoral Sonata. That.
I'm not sure I know that one.
I
might know if I heard
beautiful. And it's like about 20 minutes long, and it has everything in it. It has like dark thunderstorms, and then it gets that you know, when the sun comes out and the clouds part, like that. To me, when I listen to that, it's like, and then it goes really low, and then you know, the sun breaks, and it's just all in there. And I think that's Beethoven and how he does things. It's just everything. Whereas like Mozart, it's like he kind of stays, but Mozart's like you know. It's like, it's so intense.
Yeah.
So I love.
And does that like bring out emotions in you? When you hear
it's
that?
Like everything that lives in us, right? It's like beauty and darkness and everything.
Right.
You know?
I was talking to another friend on here about. He was telling me the difference between Baroque and classical. I didn't know there was even I didn't even know what Baroque was until we started talking about it. But he was kind of explaining to me what the difference was as far as instrumentation and the way it is. But he was also talking about, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because he was also talking about how some of these classical songs or Baroque, I forget which one he said it was, maybe both, but that it's like it's literally telling a story without words. Right, like you were just talking about, like you got the storms, and then you got the clear skies, and like, and it was we listen to that, we're not necessarily hearing lyrics that are telling us that, but we hear that noise and we think, okay, this sounds like darkness, and it's like, well, darkness doesn't have a sound, but it kind of does, right? Like we hear the doom doom doom, it's like, oh, that sounds like darkness, and then you hear this light sound breaking through, right? And it's like, oh, you know, and we get these visual images in our heads that are put there simply by what they're doing with these instruments, and I think that's fascinating. Because one thing for me to sit here and tell a story, I can convey words to you, and you'll know exactly what I'm saying. Well, maybe sometimes, but if not, I can continue to explain it with words. But for somebody to be able to convey a message with no words, just using instruments, I think is just unreal. That's really cool.
It's really cool. And yeah, also the fact that wasn't Beethoven, he became deaf towards the end of his life.
I think
he was in, they call it like the music of the spheres. So he was in touch with all of that, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just going to message. Yeah.
I think wasn't Mozart and Beethoven both deaf, or I
think it was
just Beethoven?
Beethoven, towards the end of his life.
Okay.
And he was just so intense.
Yeah.
I would have been intrigued with him as a, I think.
Yeah, it'd be really cool to they always say, well, if you could meet any person, and sit down with them over coffee and talk about something, it's like, I mean, I would have a huge list, of course, but it'd be really cool. People that were unique in such a way that they made an impact on the world because of that. People like that no one else has really been able to do what they did. There's certain people I have on that list, but I mean, no one's ever really been able to duplicate. There's been a lot of copycats, and I think everybody's influenced by things, of course. But even with music, you think, oh, that band sounds kind of like this band, who sounds kind of like that band, and you can usually go down that road. But then there's a band where you're like, I haven't heard anybody else ever really sound like that. I was just talking about the Beastie Boys the other day. And I'm like, to me, I mean, yeah, they're doing rap music, but they're doing it in a style that I don't think I've ever heard any other rap group do. Right? A Beastie Boys song comes on, you're like, oh, that's the Beastie Boys. Instantly, right? It's oh yeah, totally, that's them. Even if it's a song you never heard, you're like, oh yeah, totally, that's Beastie Boys. And you brought up Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I think
I just love
right, yeah,
and it's it just gets you moving.
Yes.
And it's not even what they say; it's just the way they use the words.
Yes,
and the rhythms.
Yes,
that I love,
and it's unique. I don't know of a lot of bands that I think sound like them. Do you have a favorite?
Not
of
really.
them?
I think lately, I like the All Around the World.
Okay. Yeah.
But I, because I have the station, so songs will come on like the Snows. I mean, there's certain albums that I like. I mean, Soul to Squeeze. I mean, there's just so many. Different things.
Yeah. Soul to Squeeze wasn't that the one on? That's the one on the Coneheads.
I think
soundtrack.
So.
I think. Yeah. That was a good song.
There's so many good songs on there,
Yeah.
and just on their album. So when I listen to the words, sometimes I'm like, well, I don't really like all the words.
Yeah, they're kind of
but
they can get kind of graphic sometimes.
Californication. I mean,
yeah.
It's like, it's not really appropriate.
Yeah.
But I don't really hide music from my kids. They listen, songs will come on, and I'll be like, oh wow, I never really heard. And my son's 16 now, and he goes to Rigetti, and it's like
School of Champions.
He wanted to have the experience,
right?
And it's like, I'm not going to deny that to him.
Yeah.
I let him, and he's got a solid foundation. So
okay, how's he liking it? Does he like it then?
I think he likes it.
Okay.
He doesn't like all the busy work, but academically he's really strong, and so he can do it.
So coming out of homeschooling, he's probably this is the total number of schoolwork you guys do here? Because when you homeschool and you do, when we first started homeschooling, we went through the public system. So we were literally doing the exact schoolwork that our daughter would have been doing had she been in class for 7 hours.
Oh, wow.
She did just the work, took her an hour. And we're like, what are they doing the other 6 hours that she's there? So, I mean, I'm sure for him it was kind of like that. He's like, oh man, this is
Not really, because I think there's a lot of busy work.
Okay.
And because I did Waldorf education, it's different. It's a whole different approach. So he has to do a lot of busy work. Luckily, I don't feel like I'm really strong in writing.
Okay.
So I had him take tutors and writing classes with excellent teachers while he was homeschooling. And his writing skills are top notch.
Okay.
So he that's a breeze for him. So right now he's doing AP literature next semester. So he had summer school. So he has to watch The Crucible, and he just finished reading Grapes of Wrath, and then find common themes and write 2 papers about it.
Nice.
He's like, oh, that's nothing.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, really?
Because he likes to write.
He likes to write, and
Okay.
he's really good at it. I think he got an award for a poem he wrote this year. At Rigetti, like his English teacher, he was in the news.
Oh wow!
Writing a poem, and
nice.
he was embarrassed because it was about my dad, and he didn't.
Oh.
He just wrote it. It wasn't like he
never thought the whole world was going to get to read it.
He only read it to me, and it's
okay.
really sweet.
Nice.
But
he's close with your dad.
Well, he didn't even read it to my dad.
Oh. But I mean, does your dad means a lot to him? Is what I mean. Like
yes.
they have a pretty close relationship.
Yes, it was called Grandfather's Truck.
Okay.
And my dad had this old beat up truck, like really old, and it's always got tons of trash inside of it. Mm-hmm. But Pete used to get to ride in his truck, and he talked about the smells and he described it and all these things. And then he was at the very end. He said, "And the only thing that I like more than my grandfather's truck is my grandfather."
Oh, nice.
So it's like that.
Nice.
Kind of
That's awesome.
But he didn't tell. He's embarrassed to read it to anybody.
Have you shown it to your dad now?
No.
Oh no.
No.
Oh, you should.
My dad. Everybody knows about it, but nobody is pressuring him.
Okay.
But so he's gotten recognition for his writing.
Okay.
At school especially.
That's really
cool. And he does really well. And then he does swim, Santa Maria Swim Club.
Okay.
So, and that's why he wanted to go to Rigetti, is because he wanted most of the kids were in school.
Right.
And he didn't really bond, and maybe, I don't know, we don't really belong to like any church or group like that. And so when you're homeschooling, when you don't belong to any group, you're kind of on the outside.
Yeah.
So
because most homeschoolers are Christians that are,
well, I wouldn't say we are,
but they're like part of
but
church.
We're not any part.
Yes.
And that's part of me being like who I am.
Right.
Because that's very personal.
Oh yeah.
And I can't like.
Yeah.
Like I might resonate with this part, but not with that.
Right.
And I can't do it.
And you will talk about that when we get there, but I think you and I will probably agree on a lot of that stuff, because I have my own issues with that area, like just church and things, and but anyway, we'll get there.
Yeah.
But
and not that I have anything against any church.
Right.
It's just me.
Right.
Like,
right.
I'm like a square peg trying to
Right.
I wish I could, but it's hard for me. It's impossible, really.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, yeah. So he found a group of friends and swim during pandemic. We were doing karate and all the different activities, and everything shut down except for swim.
Oh wow.
They fought this. They had a fight to keep this pool open.
Is it at Paul Nelson? Mm-hmm. They did close a few times though.
They closed from March through June.
Yeah. Okay.
The very beginning, and after that they would open the rest.
Okay.
The rest of the pandemic. So that was because I was adamant that I wasn't, the first few weeks we didn't really know what was going on. But after that, I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Right. And I think that was all of us in the beginning of that, because we didn't know.
We didn't.
It was, I think it was healthy to have a little bit of fear in the beginning, because you just didn't know. You're watching the news and you're like, oh my gosh, people are dropping dead everywhere from this airborne disease that they're catching. And it's like, what is this? But then after stuff started to come out, and then you still saw people that were freaking out, I'm like, okay, we shouldn't be freaking out anymore. Like, this is
like how many years later?
Right, even today, right? And I've said this, I still see people driving around in their car by themselves wearing a mask. I just want to pull them over. Sir, what are you doing? Please explain it to me. My brain just cannot comprehend. What are you doing? Like, I can't think of anything he could say that would make sense to me. Oh, I'm trying not to get COVID. Well, you're in your car by yourself. If there's COVID in your car, it's anyway. Yeah,
so that's how he got into swim, both of my kids. Okay. It's because that was their only in-person activity that was regular.
Yeah.
And then
So back, real quick, I want to go into this a little bit further about. You said that you don't really. I forgot how you worded it, but basically with music and stuff, you don't necessarily keep your kids from, if there's things in songs that you call bad content or whatever, you said you don't really prevent them from listening to that or anything like that.
Well, I try not to. In fact, I tried not to, of course, but sometimes like I have this serious and a song will come on.
Okay.
Oh gosh, there's one thing. It's like a rap. It's called. Oh, remember who was that singer? LL Cool J.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I liked some of his songs when I was like in junior high.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so there's a station, it's an LL Cool J station. So then sometimes I'm listening to that, and then there was a song that came in. Was it Boys in the Hood or?
Oh, Boys in the Hood was Eazy-E.
It was Eazy-E?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there were some of these songs that came in. So then I'll listen to them, and then some of this, then I'm like, oh my goodness, there's some.
Yeah.
So they'll hear it, and, you know, I'm like, gosh, I used to listen to that, and I didn't even think about it.
Right,
some
right.
of these words in these songs.
Yeah, it becomes different when you're a parent.
Right. So it wasn't like I immediately changed the station.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know, and it's now they're older, they're both teenagers.
Right.
But now I'm like, oh, I used to like this song, and I'm grieving, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't so appropriate.
Right.
And then my son will say, Mom, oh yeah, I know about that stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
So do you kind of like use that as a teaching? Like if your son came home from school and he started using language like that, you'd probably, but
Absolutely.
if you would be like, nah.
It's more like we know it's there,
Right.
and we know it's got a good beat, and
Right.
we know the songs aren't appropriate.
Right.
It's like that. Like,
Right.
okay, yes, I can enjoy the talent that they put into the beat of this music, and that this is great and it's catchy.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't agree with the content of the literature, but I can appreciate this part. It's like that. Like, right? We want to do that with everything. Like, we can appreciate this part, and we can say we don't like this part.
Or like a movie
but
you're watching,
we can still
too.
appreciate part of it.
Sure.
And that's kind of what...
Right. Find the beauty in it.
Yeah.
But also call out the stuff that's not.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like we can... And they get it.
Right.
And I hope that they can do that, too.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. But I don't like say, oh, this is terrible, we got to change it. I'm like, no, I can appreciate
Or plug their ears, you know.
Yeah.
Turn it off quick!
I mean, they've heard words.
Sure. I mean, especially if your son's in Rigetti. No, I'm sure he probably hears it on a day-to-day.
He says, Mom, you wouldn't believe. He does not agree with a lot of what he hears there.
Nice. See, that's beautiful to me, because that means, you said a minute ago, he has the foundation. You guys have given him a foundation, and now he's out in the world. He's at this public high school with these kids that maybe don't have that good of a foundation, but instead of acclimating to it or attaching himself to it, he's able to say, Mom, man, these guys are just, they don't got it. You know, there's something wrong here. You know, he's able to identify it and see it as an issue, as opposed to just...
And he sees it as like a huge issue.
Right.
It's not like just a few people here and there. It's kind of a cultural thing.
Sure.
Some things really bother him.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, with the drugs and the sex and everything that's happening in high schools now, that, I mean, of course, was happening when we were there too.
Oh yeah. But
now it's like, it's just what kids are doing now. It's like, you know, it's sleeping with a different person every day, and they're just like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, he's definitely not involved in that part.
Right.
But he, so he's like 6'4" now. So
Dang.
He's like so tall.
Is he? Your husband's not that tall, is he?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, he's like 6'4".
Okay.
So he's kind of a tall guy, so that's kind of good for him.
Okay.
Because he's like, it's good to be big.
Yeah. Does he play sports at all, like basketball
he does
or
swim, and he's thinking
swimming?
about doing
That's right.
basketball.
Yeah, he should get in there for basketball, because his height alone would be a huge advantage.
Yeah, I think he's going to try out for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's a sophomore?
He'll be 11th grade, so it's a little late, but I think he still wants to try.
He should.
I mean, we have a basketball hoop in the yard, and so he plays. Last night at 8:30, he was shooting hoops.
Nice.
So I think he wants to. He's really good at swimming. So
Yeah.
That's a part of the reason he wanted to go to school, too, is just the sports. He loves just this interaction. And I said no to football.
Nice. Yeah, you're like,
he really wanted to do football, and I'm like, absolutely not.
Yeah. That's kind of a mom thing. I think most moms don't want their boys playing football. Because they're, you know. And
like, you're too smart.
Yeah.
I don't want you to get a concussion in your brain.
You're better than this. Oh, man. Yeah, and I understand that. I get it. You know, to where a lot of dads are like, oh, no, let them out there, a little toughen them up.
No.
You know, but then you hear those stories about, like you said, kids that get permanently injured, you know, and it's like, there's no taking that back, you know.
So now he just watches football. He loves watching it.
Yeah.
And following it. And basketball. And he tells me all about the statistics and what's going on.
Oh, wow. He's into it big time.
He's really into it.
Okay. Who's his favorite teams, do you know?
Oh, he likes the Patriots.
Okay.
For football.
Yeah.
And for basketball, he likes LeBron James.
Okay.
Know.
I'll pray for him. Just messing around. All right, so real quick before we leave the music, this will be the last thing. But if you can even do this is hard for some people. But to give me like your top 5 all-time favorite band, singer, musical
songs.
artist. It can be songs, sure. If that's easier for them, that's harder for some people to come up with actual songs.
Okay, I kind of thought about it. So I like Lori Lewis, Hold to a Dream.
Never even heard of her. Lori Lewis?
She's a bluegrass.
Okay, Lori Lewis.
Yes, I like River Cantina, and I've just heard it played at music concerts.
Okay.
It's a song.
That's a song by her also?
No.
Oh, that's a different person.
I heard, the best I ever heard was live by some random band from Santa Cruz.
Okay. Okay.
I like the something with, I think it's Good People, Jack Johnson.
Okay.
I like Jack Johnson in general. Yeah. Just about most of his songs are great.
Real mellow kind of kickback stuff. Yeah.
I really like Jack Johnson. If I have to do like the mainstream, that's my most mainstream, Jack.
Okay.
And I like that Pastoral Sonata by Beethoven.
Uh-huh.
And then let me think one more. I don't know. U2, One Love. I just saw U2 there.
Dude, U2, that's my favorite U2 song of all time.
Yeah.
And most people have never, I mean, they've heard it, but when you say U2, like, what's your favorite? They usually go to something off Joshua Tree, like Where the Streets Have No Name or With or Without You, or that song One is like...
But We're Not the Same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it whenever it comes on. So I'm a car singer. I'm a shower singer and a car singer, but I rarely sing in front of other people. Uh-huh. But there's certain songs when they come on in my car, I mean, I'm just, even if I'm almost home, like from work, and the song's only halfway over, I will drive around the block until it's over. That's one of them.
Oh yeah, I'll sit in the car and listen.
It's just, oh my gosh, it's so, and
it's sad too.
Yeah. And it's funny because it came out when I was in like junior high.
Really?
Right. So it's probably high school for you.
So I was like a senior.
Yeah, right. I think it was like 8th grade when that came, because I was on Octoon Baby, which I want to say was 91.
Yeah, I went to that concert.
You saw them live?
Jeremy Morlos.
No way.
Yeah, because we stayed friends after, and he invited me to concerts. And when I was in college, he invited me to go to that concert.
Nice.
Yeah.
But that's awesome though to have gotten to see them live.
No, Octoon Baby.
And that was during that tour when that album came out. Yeah, because most people say Joshua Tree, and don't get me wrong, Joshua Tree is an epic album, but Octoon Baby's got some great songs on there. I mean, Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses, Mysterious Ways, One is the greatest.
Favorite,
oh my gosh, that's so cool to hear you say that.
Yeah,
because I've never heard anybody say that as that being
that's
their
my
favorite.
I like U2 a lot, and that's my favorite of all their songs.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, hands down. None of the other ones even come close.
So that's 5.
Yeah, that's 5. You nailed it.
Okay.
Good job. All right, and then we'll finish out. We'll spend about 15 more minutes. We'll finish out the political stuff because we've already.
Oh, we only have 15 minutes left
for political stuff. Okay. Then we're going to get into spiritual stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I wanted to go back to what we were saying before about the taking away our rights. I know you were talking a lot. I think you were referring to like COVID and masking and vaccinations.
But even before, even in 2015, I was up at the Capitol a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because you were living in New Hampshire, or
no? In 2015, I was living here in Santa Maria. But so it got into vaccination back in 2015.
Really? So even before COVID?
So in 2015, there was SB 276, I believe. Was it 277?
Was that swine flu or?
No, it was if you want your children to go to school, they have to have every single shot on the list.
Oh, gotcha.
And if they don't have it, they can't go to school.
Right.
And to me, that was a huge affront.
Right.
Like, how can you deny children an education because they refuse to inject themselves? Because I had done the research on what's in the vaccines, like heavy doses of aluminum, aborted fetal tissue. Right. I mean, polysorbate 80, like all these things that it's like they don't tell you it's in them. And why am I injecting all of this into my kids?
Why is it even in there is the question. Like, is it doing something to the vaccine? Is it making it more potent? Like, why is it even there? Right? Like a vaccine should just be a small amount of whatever the disease is you're trying to prevent.
With an adjuvant.
Yeah.
So the adjuvant they say is aluminum, but the thing about it, it's like there are other adjuvant. I mean, they don't have to use that. It's just why. Anyways, so I did not. So when I did my teacher training in New Hampshire back in 1998, they had a few doctors come and speak to the teachers that were training.
Right.
And they were anthroposophical doctors. So they have their MDs, and that goes back into Waldorf education and my spiritual
What does
path.
that mean?
Anthroposophy, it's wisdom of the human being.
Okay.
And that's my spiritual path.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, because it's all connected.
Okay.
So, basically, during my teacher training, they had 2 doctors come in. They're both MDs, but they're anthroposophically trained. Mm-hmm. And one of them talked to us about the pros and cons of vaccination, which I had never heard before.
Okay.
And he went through every vaccine and what the pros were, what the cons were of doing it. So after that, I thought, well, and then another doctor later on, who became my doctor. Both of these doctors I still follow and very close to. Mm-hmm. So I decided that when my children were born, I would probably just do this one or that one, and I would wait, until they were a certain age to develop their immune system first. And so I had a whole plan. And I did it pretty well with Pete. So he didn't get his first shot until he was 2.
Oh, wow.
And then I only got him a few. Mm-hmm. Because, I didn't really think he needed all the ones that they...
Right, you're informed.
I'm informed.
You're an informed parent who's getting the one, you've researched them all, and you're thinking, okay, I think this one is beneficial, this one is not, this one is not necessary, and I think all parents should be that way.
And they took that right away from us. If we want our kids to go to school...
With the SB, whatever?
SB 277, they said, no, if they don't have all the shots that we're recommending, they can't go to school. Well, that's our decision. And then, so that really... So then when my daughter was born, it was this whole scare with whooping cough in 2010. So I did, what I was supposed to do. And then I saw that it didn't affect my daughter very well. It didn't affect me very well. And then, anyways, we had a really bad experience with the pediatrician. And I just decided. And then, anyways, I ended up seeing an anthroposophical doctor. And my daughter was now 4. So I stopped getting her shots or even going to the pediatrician because it was a really bad experience.
Right. They try to fight you every time you go in there and try to force you into something that you...
Well, she had a fever and she was breathing funny and she was about 18 months old. So I took her into the pediatrician and they looked at her chart. It wasn't her real pediatrician. It was somebody in the office that worked there. Another pediatrician, not ours. And the doctor said, I can see right here she didn't get her pneumococcal shot, so she's got pneumonia. I've got to pull out the big guns. So she gave her 2 shots of antibiotics in her legs and sent her home with antibiotics. And after that, she was really, she was pale. She developed food allergies.
Now, was that almost like a shot at you? Like, oh, I see she hasn't had this, so she must have pneumonia. That's all your fault.
So I said, what makes you think she has pneumonia? Because she didn't have a cough. She said, well, her oximeter level was a little low on her finger when she did it.
Oh my gosh.
So that was on a Friday. We went back on a Monday. So I'm freaking out. I'm like, does she have to go to the hospital? My baby has pneumonia. Oh my gosh. We went back on a Monday and our real pediatrician was there and he checked her and now she went from 94 to 100%, her oximeter. I said, so is that normal that they go from 94 to 100 like that? And then he read the chart. He said, well, it says right here that when they took her oximeter reading, she was fidgeting and moving around, so it probably wasn't even appropriate. It wasn't like a real reading. And I said, well, that's why she told me that we had to...
See, that lady should be fired over that,
And he's all, oh. And he basically admitted that she was probably trying to give me a slap on the hand for not getting
Then she should be fired.
So she hurt my child.
Yeah.
And so after that, I was like, I don't want to go back to the doctors because they hurt my child because I chose to not get her the pneumococcal shot.
Right.
And so then my daughter was 18 months. So when she was about 4, my husband said maybe we should finish, getting her shots that we had chosen to do. We went to the anthroposophical doctor. She said, well, I just want you to know, she was one of the doctors. So she was in New Hampshire, but now she's in Sacramento, where I was living at the time. She said, Monique, since the last time I gave you information about vaccines, things have changed and we have new data. And the new data is that the aluminum in the vaccines can cause brain inflammation. So what we want to do, if you choose, like informed consent, right? If you choose to get your daughter to the vaccine, what we can do is we can get an ice pack and put it on the site. So like a snake bite with venom, it slows it from getting all into the brain. we can do it on her leg and put an ice pack there so the aluminum will, it's a known neurotoxin and carcinogen, so it doesn't get into her brain.
Why don't they just take that out of there? Why don't they just remove the aluminum?
Well, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Like, why? And then I was like, no. And then I started doing my research.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. I don't even want to do the one or two that we were doing.
Right.
That was in 2014. And then in 2015, SB 277. Now, if you want your kids to go to school, you have to get all these shots. Well, I think 25 micrograms is the FDA limit for aluminum for an adult a day. So a newborn baby getting the Hep B shot when they're only 7 pounds, 8 pounds, 225 micrograms alone. Now, like their second baby visit, they'll get like 3 or 4 shots, and each one has like 200, micrograms. Right. So this child's getting, between 600 and 1,000 micrograms of aluminum at this 10 pound, 12, 15 pound babies over and over and over. And then it's like, okay, so yeah, you can't say for sure that like all these food allergies and autism and all this stuff is connected, but it's like, well,
something's happening.
But the media is like all one, vaccines are safe and effective over and over and over and over and over.
There's no problems at all.
10,000 times. Yeah. But then it's like, how many pharma commercials do you see on the mainstream media?
Yes.
So why are they going to say anything about? So anyway, so it was a big thing. I started doing research. I was up there a lot. I mean, the moms filled that building. We just were up there. I got to see and be part of so much doing that. Right. But then,
and this is up in Sacramento?
Yeah, so that's when I got involved. And then I thought, I used to post on social media. I lost so many friends and I did not care because I was like, if I can help one child from not being damaged or injured because they, I used to post just information like that about aluminum. Mm-hmm. Just know this is what you're injecting in your child. Aborted fetal tissue. Just know this is what you're injecting in your child.
Just to inform people.
Yeah. Just like the 69 shots by the age of 18.
Right.
It's like all this stuff. So I used to do that a lot. And then, anyways, I forget where it's going. But yeah, so that's where but in the end, they passed it. And I was like, it went, and back then, that was 2015, 2016, 2015, they passed it. So we knew that they weren't going to stop with the children. Mm-hmm. And back then, they already had a program. It was called healthypeople2020.gov. And that program said by 2020, they don't just want all the children vaccinated. Right. They want all the adults fully vaccinated. Right. So we already knew. So when 2020 came, and it was February, and I wasn't really paying attention. I heard this virus. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden in February, I was like, then I saw like the lock. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 2020. This is what they said in 5 years. 2020 was their plan, mandatory vaccination for everybody. It was going to be tied to your employment. Like we knew in 2015 that was the plan because they have so much power. The pharmaceutical lobbyists, they just.
So do you hold then that I'm not trying to put words in here so you tell me, but there's some people that would say that since they were kind of planning that from 2015, that like COVID was like a purposely released so they could do all that on,
Have you heard of Event 201?
Not by name. Doesn't sound familiar.
So in October of 2019, I believe it was in New York, they had a mock coronavirus pandemic.
Like a practice?
Practice. Funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the CDC,
really,
the media, and they talked about shutting down YouTube and like all the things that they did.
Wow.
They practiced it. You can look it up. They don't even try to hide it, and they are still doing those sort of drills. Right. And the whole drill of everything they did, the lockdown, like everything, October of 2019. Right. They did it.
So do you think? Okay. So do you think that like when you look at the numbers? The stats from COVID and the death toll and all that, do you think those are real numbers?
No. Okay. They've even admitted recently that they're not real numbers. That they were Somebody could be in a motorcycle accident and then they tested them when they were dead, and that's it.
Well, I have a friend of a friend who's a doctor, and they were even flat out admitting that when people come into the hospital, we are given the hospital is given a certain amount of money for all of the COVID deaths for each COVID death, right? So then that's why they start doing things like that. It's like, okay, yeah, he's in 5 pieces and he was just in an automobile accident, but give him a blood test.
Yeah.
Test him for COVID. If he's COVID positive, then hey, it's COVID death.
Right.
You know? So I mean, so there obviously some fear mongering going on from the get-go.
Right.
Right? They're trying to make everybody think that if you go outside and you breathe, you're going to die. Right? This is what they want everybody to think.
Australia was horrible.
Oh, it was horrible.
Oh
yeah, some of those stories about some guy on the run because he refused to wear a mask or get vaccinated or whatever.
Or you
it's
leave
like
your house.
Right. Well, that was the thing. That guy left his house, and then it was a manhunt, and it was like a week, and they were chasing this guy around trying to capture this guy. I was like, what in the world were we doing? Like, again, if it's like, you know, Will Smith, I Am Legend, and we have like some airborne virus that's literally killing 95% of the people that breathe it in, then yes. If that's actually true, then yes, we should probably all be staying in our houses and we should probably be locking things down. We shouldn't be congregating in big areas.
Right.
But if that's not happening, right, and as time went on and we started to realize, because we're seeing all these stats, and I think most of us know somebody or knew somebody who died from COVID, right? Or so they said died from COVID. But even then, you're starting to look around, you're thinking, most people I know are fine, you know?
To be honest with you, I'm trying to think if I did. I know one of my friends' brothers died at the beginning. Okay. But he was put in a hospital on a ventilator, you know, all
right.
For like, and so
right.
Like what really killed him?
Right.
I mean, he was in his like late 70s.
Well, and that's what's scary. Right, because there's certain hospitals in I won't get too specific, but there was a state that it wasn't California, it was somewhere else, but there was a certain hospital that became known for COVID patients dying in that hospital, even people that weren't in their 70s or 80s. We're talking 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds checking into this hospital because they had COVID. And never coming out, you know, and it's like, and then you take that and you look at the statistics for that hospital and you look at some of the hospitals in the surrounding cities, and that's not happening. And then you're going, wait a minute, is it just this city that has a certain strain of COVID that's like, I mean, obviously not. Yeah. So then the question is, what are these hospitals doing? What are they being told? Are they being told, and this is all conspiracy stuff that may or may not be true.
It's just like, I think that's just like somebody thinking for themselves.
Right.
Now that's a way to clamp down. Oh no, you can't think for yourself. If you go out of that box, then you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, I take it as a compliment.
Yeah. I mean, I only say I don't mean it in a derogatory way. I just mean that. Because the simple fact is we don't have all the information because they're not giving it to us. And the information that we think we're getting is not necessarily true. So I don't feel comfortable standing on top of something and saying, yep, I can guarantee without a shadow of doubt that hospitals are killing people because they want the numbers and they want to make COVID look worse than it is, and they're trying to boost this up. That could very well be very true. And I think there's a lot of evidence to support that. But for me, there's not conclusive evidence. There's not something that will make you say, oh,
it's
definitely,
questionable.
You know,
we just have to use our own brain, right?
We use our own brains, but at the same time, if we don't have all the data, it's hard to make an informed decision. Like, in order to really study something, you have to have all the data available. Otherwise, you're just going to say, well, it seems to be leaning this direction. You see what I'm saying? Like, we can take all these stories, like I just mentioned about that hospital. Obviously, something's going on there. And I can say that definitively, but I can't go as far as saying, so I think they're purposely killing people.
You're right. And then they're censoring everything. That's the other huge thing that bothered me tremendously is the censorship of YouTube and all these doctors that I listen to and people everything was censored. Right. It was terrible.
Which is interesting. Like even on this podcast in the first season, I had, so when I release an episode, I put a synopsis, like I put a little things discussed in this episode. Yeah. And in one of them, we had discussed the vaccine. So I put that word. I didn't know. So my daughter, she calls me and she's like, Dad, did you know that 2 of your episodes are flagged? Yeah. As COVID misinformation? I was like, what? Yeah. Are you serious? She goes, yeah. And I'm thinking, I can't think of why, right? And then I realized that's why I wrote that on there. And then they saw that. I'm like, there's no way these people are listening through the 3-hour episodes.
The vaccines, I think, are one of the biggest issues of our time. And that's what I saw in 2015 when I started doing the research. And so it's the pharmaceutical, I mean, talk about going down rabbit holes. You can go down some pretty crazy rabbit holes when you start looking into all of that and the history of it.
Right.
And even the efficacy of it all.
Right. Well, even everything coming out now with like Fauci and the gain of function research in Wuhan and all this stuff that's coming out now. Of course, back in the middle of the pandemic, everybody's celebrating Fauci like he's Jesus or something, you know, and he's saving mankind. I don't know about all that. You know, one of my favorite things with Rand Paul, you know, Rand Paul is. Like Rand Paul. So watching Rand Paul grill Fauci about everything in Wuhan and gain of function research, and Fauci was getting nervous. You could tell he was getting angry because he didn't know how, he couldn't find a way out of it, right? It's one thing to say stuff on the TV and then you're off the screen and you're out of there, but like you're in the hot seat and you got a congressman who's drilling you with these questions, and what are you going to do? You can't be totally honest because then you're going to admit your guilt, right? So, I mean, I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, I like Rand Paul too. I like how he's so blunt.
Yeah. So the story about Fauci. So my dad's a Vietnam vet, and he got really sick right at the beginning of the pandemic. He was in the VA hospital for months. Oh, that bad? Really bad.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I was in and out of the hospital during all COVID down there. But so my friend. So I met a lot of people back in 2015, being part of that. I don't know what you want to call it.
The group of moms that were fighting for the vaccine rights?
Yes.
Gotcha. That's what we'll call it. That's a good name.
That's what we'll call it. We call it a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So being part of that, I met a lot of people. One of them was Dr. Judy Mikovits, and I don't know if you ever saw Plandemic that came out right at the beginning.
No, didn't see that one. Okay. I heard of it, but I didn't see it.
2 billion views right at the beginning.
Oh, wow.
So she was helping me with, and my dad. She was helping my dad at the beginning, trying to figure out what we could do naturally before the pandemic. And she wrote 2 books, Plague, forget the names, but anyways, Plague something. And I had read them right before the pandemic. Well, one of the books is all about Fauci. He destroyed her career.
And this is before the pandemic. Interesting.
So right when the pandemic came out, I just finished reading her Plague of Corruption.
So when you heard his name on TV,
I was like, oh, that guy.
You're like, I know this guy already.
This guy, he's a bad guy. Right away. Yeah, because I just finished reading, I think it's Plague of Corruption.
Right.
Or maybe it was the other book. She wrote 2 books right on top of each other. And then Plague of Corruption, I think maybe that was the second book. It came out like in March. And it was, but she had written it like a year before. Right. So it was like so good. But it's like, I can't, I try to tell people, but it's like nobody really,
Well, that goes back to thinking for yourself, right? When people they're willing to actually look in and research things, or just, everyone else is doing it, so I guess it's okay.
Yeah. It's at that point, I had been so outspoken earlier on in 2015 that at this, like all the people who pretty much like hated what I had to say had already like cut me out. And so nobody, like nobody really bothered me because they already knew where I stood and all this stuff. Right. And at that point I was like, I guess, if anybody wanted to know, I would tell them, but I wasn't going to go like broadcasting, hey, don't do this, I was like, you got to let people figure things out for themselves. Right. To a certain degree. I was kind of over it.
Yeah. Well, you can only do so much. You can share information. That's pretty much all you can do. They choose whether or not they're going to receive that information.
Yeah. So that was it. Okay. Maybe we should go to another topic.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's go on to spirituality. So let's, why don't you just kind of walk me through, I like to start with, especially because I really don't know anything about your spiritual beliefs. So why don't you kind of walk me through where you are today with your spiritual beliefs, and whether or not you've always felt that way, or if it's something you've kind of evolved into, like early on, like what did you believe as a kid? What do you believe now? That kind of thing.
So I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
I went to church every Sunday.
Okay.
Until I was 18. And then even a little bit in college. And
always Catholic church, mass, or okay. And your parents, are they still Catholic today?
I think so.
Okay.
And so So then I was in college, and of course I started studying history about the Catholic Church and all the corruption. I didn't like it.
Right.
But I knew I didn't discredit my belief in God at all, ever. It just made me doubt the institution.
Right. Because it wasn't God doing those things. It was people doing those things.
Yeah. And there were still good people doing good things during that time, like St. Francis of Assisi.
Yep.
Then when I was 19, the summer after my freshman year, I met somebody who was my age. Oh, so when I went into college, I wanted to be an international corporate lawyer.
Lawyer? Oh, wow.
Maybe work for Monsanto.
Okay. All right.
But after my freshman year, I changed a lot.
Okay.
So I met somebody when I was 19. He went to so by the end of the year, I wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
Because I thought, what better job to be a mom than to be a teacher? So I go to school with them. I have breaks with them. So I totally changed my outlook.
Yeah.
But that summer, I met a young man who'd gone to a Waldorf school himself, and I never heard of Waldorf education.
Okay.
So we spent about an hour. He told me all about Waldorf's education, maybe 2 hours.
So it was the first time you ever heard of it.
And it was everything like I had imagined how things should be. But it was like he was telling me everything. It was like this incredible like experience. And after 2 hours, we shook hands, and he said, at the same time I said, I want to be a Waldorf teacher. He's like, you should be a Waldorf teacher. Like we said it simultaneously. And then I just knew that's what I was going to do.
Right. Wow.
I was 19. At that point, a lot of things fell apart for me.
As far as your beliefs, you mean, or?
My life.
Oh, just in general. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, like I was in a relationship with someone I really liked, and, you know, everything just started falling apart. So came crashing down. So, but my light at the end of the tunnel was Waldorf education. I knew that's what I was going to do. So all the stuff happening around me, it was like, was like, I had my eye on that.
Right.
So I started looking into it a little bit, and I found out that it was founded by I don't know if founded is the right word. It was begun by a man named Rudolph Steiner, who was and he was part of something called the Anthroposophy.
Right.
So I thought, well, if I were to do this Waldorf school thing, I better figure out if this Anthroposophy thing is something that resonates with me.
Because that was a big part of Waldorf.
Waldorf education is a fruit of Anthroposophy.
Okay.
As is anthroposophical medicine, as is Eurythmy, as is biodynamic agriculture, like as is architecture. It's basically a renewal of all things. It's renewal because everything's disintegrating, as you can see with our culture. So his idea was Anthroposophy renews all things that are disintegrating in our culture. And
like
education.
Atrophy, and I call it atrophy when things are winding down as opposed to winding up. Maybe I got the wrong word.
Roman civilization, it disintegrated really, right? Yeah.
Right.
It was like it's almost like we are doing that as a nation, as a culture,
right?
In general, like world,
right.
Science. So I started studying it back then, but I couldn't. There were a few books at the library, and I was at the Golgotha library. I got a couple of his books. I'm like, I can't get past the first paragraph. I can't read this stuff. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, I put it back. It wasn't until I was 23 that I actually could pick up a book by Steiner and get past the first paragraph.
Oh, wow.
But he only really wrote, I think, 5 basic books, and everything else are lectures that he gave that people copied, so they're not necessarily completely accurate because he never had a chance. He gave over like 5,000 or 6,000 lectures. I can't remember. So they're not all... He never had a chance to go back, so who knows if they wrote it down accurately. But I read those too.
Okay.
So I was 23, I finally could get through the first book. Then I found a study group in Santa Barbara. It was like the second oldest continuous anthroposophical study group in the United States, the Helen Hecker group. They were all like in their 70s and 80s, and they let me study with them.
Nice.
It was really good. So I never really stopped studying. So I would say I'm a student of Rudolph Steiner. Anthroposophy is my spiritual path.
Gotcha.
So that's...
So do you see that as different than Catholicism then in major ways, or do you just see it as you kind of branching out from Catholicism into that kind of spiritual offshoot in a sense? Or do you see it as completely, in other words, like, do you see yourself as completely changing your viewpoint on spirituality, or do you see it as a branch off the same tree?
No, I say, for me, okay, so the word Weltanschauung is worldview.
What language is that?
German.
German, okay.
And so Steiner was born in Austria, so a lot of his work is in German. And so Weltanschauung is worldview. So for me, Anthroposophy is like a worldview that everything fits in. There's a space and a place for all things.
Okay.
So it's not like...
So like all religions, you would say, would all fit in there somehow.
Because it's historical. And if you look but at the center of it all is the Christ.
Okay.
So ultimately, another way... So if you want to get like specific... So I told you there's biodynamic agriculture. Biodynamic wine's a thing if you do wine. Waldorf education, these are all fruits of it. But if you want to get into of anthroposophy, like at what is at the root of it, I would call it esoteric Christianity, because it's not... If I were to like tell my friends my ideas of Christianity, it would not be the same per se.
Right.
Exactly. But it's at the root of it. I would call it esoteric Christianity.
Okay.
That's what it is.
So you say at the center all of it is the Christ.
Yes.
Which is obviously a Christian deity or
what is the Christ, right?
Well, I mean, just like
the mystery of Golgotha.
Well, like somebody who let's say is Hindu or Buddhist, or they would describe their spiritual path, and I don't think they would say that the Christ is the center of it.
Yet, if you look at things historically, so the Christ incarnated, 2,000 something years ago, right? Okay, well, are we going to say that Christ didn't exist prior to that? This high spiritual being, obviously, that's not...
No, I believe Christ has always been in existence. I think even in the Bible, where in Genesis, even where it says, "Let us make man in our image," it's plural. So, I mean, I think when Mary gave birth to Jesus, that wasn't the beginning of Christ. That was just the time that Christ became a human. Exactly. That was when he entered into our world. I think he's always been in existence.
So if you go back to the older religions, Hinduism, Krishna, Ahura Mazda, those are all, from an anthroposophical perspective, aspects of the Christ prior to the birth of Christianity, per se. So they're not to be, they have their place in time and their value. And they're not to be, and they brought gifts. Judaism, obviously.
Right.
I mean, it's all part of leading up to what Steiner would say is, and I hate to say that.
Why?
The turning point of time is what, like, of Christianity. Like, that is when the actual incarnation of the Christ came. That is called the turning point of time.
Okay.
Because things before and after won't ever be the same.
Right.
Because the Christ united with the earth.
Right.
Right? Before that, it was different.
Yes.
Incarnated into a human vessel.
Right.
That's like, I mean,
right.
Yeah. So it's just...
Yeah. So from your kind of perspective, what would you see? What was the purpose behind Jesus becoming a human and entering our world?
I would call that the mystery of Golgotha, which is a mystery. Okay. And
is that a Steiner term, or is that like, I know Golgotha is in the Bible. That's where
I don't know if that's a Steiner term or not.
He was crucified
right?
on, but
Well, the crucifixion,
right?
The turning point of time. I mean, it's. It's hard to get really into it because what was the purpose? Well, it was the redemption of humanity in the earth.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree.
It was,
right.
I mean, if the Christ had not come to the earth, I mean, things would be very different. That, you know, at the time, I mean, Steiner has a lecture series called The Fifth Gospel, which I thought about probably that I shouldn't mention that, but
why?
Because of what's in it.
Oh.
That is controversial as far as... Right, it would be considered controversial.
Well, even the idea of a fifth gospel might be controversial to some people that would hold to the entire Bible as being the completed revelation of God. And for anybody to add a fifth gospel would almost sound like, why are you adding to the God's word kind of thing, right? So, I mean... Well,
but so from an anthroposophical perspective, if we look at the evolution, as you say, evolution of consciousness, divinity is living spirit, right? Holy Spirit. If you look at it from that perspective, we can't say that, you know, if we were to say, like the Jewish religion would say that this is all that it is. And then say that the Bible, this is all that it is. Like, and then the Hindus would say, or the Bhagavad Gita, this is all that it is.
Right.
And so you can't, divinity is, spirit is living. And so we're 2,000 years out. So Steiner would, from an anthroposophical perspective, would say that spirit is still living and moving. And we can't, so I guess that's probably why I wouldn't fit into a Christian church type of box, because I wouldn't limit myself to
just the Bible.
Right. Because I believe the Bible is a very beautiful, important, immense, incredible gift.
Right.
But we can't not acknowledge that we are here now at 2,000 years, and if we stick to that, we see disintegration. Yeah, that's the root, that's the turning point, but we need to grow from there. We can't stay stuck in just like that.
Right.
I mean, you know, limit ourselves like to just dogma.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Because there's a lot in the Bible. If you read the Bible, and I have to say I've read the Bible, but nowhere near enough. And I really admire my Christian friends who read the Bible and know it like the back of their hand. I can't say that I do, because I just read too much. I read too much of lots of things, and I haven't just read the Bible.
Right. So do you see as something like the Quran in Islam as being like just as important or beautiful as a gift as the Bible, or do you see it as equals?
No. So if you get, sorry.
For what?
Well, if you get into, there's like, just like you look at everything and you see the beauty of it, and then you see like a song, like the song I was talking about earlier today. Right. So there's definitely something there that's good. But the way I would say compare Islam to Christianity is, I would say Islam is like the moon and Christianity is like the sun. Well, the moon only has the light that comes from the sun, right? That's the only reason you see the moon. I would compare, and even Islam, their symbol is the moon. I mean, it gets right down to their symbol. So there's the moon is the light is a reflection of the sun, or there's the sun. So you're right. It's like,
so that gets down to what you're saying about like Christ being the center, and all the other things are offshoots. And when you say Christ, you're not referring to that moment when Jesus became a human. You're talking about he's always been in existence. So therefore, any of these other belief systems are going to be like an offshoot of some form of
and we can take the good from them. Like in Waldorf education in 5th grade, you study Hinduism, you study the Persian culture, you study you study Egyptian culture, Roman, Greeks, all of that, and their religions.
Right.
So we don't try to. That's it. We don't say like, oh, we can't study those blue people, like as one of my friends once said.
Yeah.
We don't shy away from it. We look at it because if you have the center
right.
of Christ,
right.
we can see the beauty in it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We don't have to be threatened by it.
Totally. And that's for me in my own walk, that's what brought me to Christianity as opposed to anything else. It's just because a lot of the other ones that I would see, it would be more like, oh, don't ask questions. Just believe what we say. Mm-hmm. It's too beyond you. You won't understand it. Just don't read that. Just listen to what we're telling you, kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. To where Christianity welcomed critique. It said, no, go ahead and attack it, right? Go ahead and look at these things. Go ahead and try to prove it wrong. And because there's been plenty of people that did that and came on the other side as Christians because they're like, I can't refute this, in a logical way, So I would say, yes, I think even now as a Christian, I would say, no, I'll read all of that. I'll read the Quran. I'll read the Book of Mormon. I'll read the Jehovah's Witness version of the Bible. I'll read all of that. But I do so the same way I do with the Bible. I'll do it as saying, this is what I believe based on my research and my studies and my personal experience. Mm-hmm. But I'm open to being correct. I'm open to being wrong. Right. But I'm going to have to see something, like in other words, if I'm reading the Book of Mormon, I'm not necessarily just doing it to say, I got to prove these stupid Mormons wrong. It's more like, well, maybe they're right. How do I know? Right. And if I'm reading the Book of Mormon and something in there convinces me that LDS is the correct theology, then I will switch over. Right. I will follow that one instead. So, yeah, I don't agree with the religions that ever say, don't go outside this. Whatever you do, just study this, just believe this. Don't ever go outside and look at other things. Mm-hmm. No, go ahead. Check it out.
One of the first, so Steiner has the 5 basic books, and one of the first basic books I read on my own was How to Know Higher Worlds. Mm-hmm. And in that book, he talks about developing a feeling for truth. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I go by. Mm-hmm. It's like, you read something and you're like, it resonates or it doesn't, right? You have that feeling for truth that we develop in ourselves.
Right.
He also in that book talks about how, so the thing about Steiner is he was unique. He was clairvoyant. So since he was a little boy, he could see into the spiritual world. He didn't realize that people couldn't until he was a little bit older, and then he realized.
He's like, what do you mean? You guys can't all do this too?
But not only that, he was a scientist. He had degrees in physics and chemistry, so he had trained his mind, and he was. So he took that sort of scientific objective training and wrote about and talked about the spiritual world, which was always there for him, like in every moment. And forget where I was going with it, but so what he said was, as humanity, we have this evolution of consciousness. And if you go back to caveman days, our consciousness is always evolving. And even if you go back 500 years, you go back to the medieval ages, like, when someone talked about the Christ, I mean, people felt it. Now you can say that and it doesn't, we're not the same consciousness. Like, obviously we've got our culture, right?
Right.
I mean, that's why that was so religious then, and it's not as much now, because now we don't necessarily always have that. It's not important to,
right.
Some people. And so if you look at the evolution of consciousness, Steiner would say that we had to go deep into matter and lose our connection to the spiritual world. So if you go back 10,000 years ago to ancient India, the physical world was Maya, and this world, and the spiritual world was what was more real to them. But then, finally you get to the Greeks, and they say better to be a pauper in this world than a king in the night of the shades, because the physical world was becoming more real to them. And so you get this like descent into matter to the point with Christ where people were completely, like, there was nothing left.
Right.
And so Steiner would say, like, now we're on an ascent. So we had to lose that connection because we had to develop our own ego, our I, so that when we go back, and now more and more people are starting to have spiritual experiences, like they see the light, different things like that. And so that being said, Steiner would say that as humanity will develop the ability to connect with the spiritual world and perceive the spiritual world now more and more, now that we've developed our own individual ego and we're not just like, children like to the spiritual world, we will develop the ability, what he said, just because you can't see, if you're blind, a color does not mean a color doesn't exist. Well,
correct.
We don't have the spiritual organs, all of humanity, yet to see and perceive the spiritual world. But just because we haven't developed those organs yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So How to Know Higher Worlds is basically written to certain exercises to do so that we can start to develop those spiritual organs.
And have you done any of that?
Yeah.
And has that worked for you? Like, have you been able to see?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it's not, this is something that, it's lifetimes. It's not like...
It's not do it over the weekend and then you're seeing the spiritual realm all of a sudden.
No.
Okay.
And just, he said, just because it doesn't seem like things may have changed for you doesn't mean they have, because it's, yeah. So it's just interesting. And I just sort of gave myself away of something else I didn't want to say because I said lifetimes. So therefore I just implied reincarnation.
Right.
So that's another aspect that's part of Anthroposophy, is that it doesn't, like Christianity is like, no, right? But if you look at the Bible and you start reading it, like even, I think in the New Testament, when John the Baptist is saying, like, for those of you who have ears to hear, I am Elijah. So, there's different things in the Bible that that you could say, don't discount it. So it doesn't have to be like either or. And that's the difference with Anthroposophy. In esoteric Christianity. It's not, it's looking at all and not just like.
Yeah, and I'll say too, so that philosophy there would have been something that's exactly not that, but the Christianity, the idea of it being an only way, was what made me used to hate it, right? Because I would much more prefer what you're talking about, which incorporates everybody and says, well, what you believe this, I believe this, but we're all part of this big circle of belief that's all really heading in the same direction anyway, just different paths, But now, as a believer in the Bible and in Jesus and what he says, I look at something like when he says, I'm the way and the truth and the life. No man comes through a man is human. No human comes to the Father but through me.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you think about some of these other religious systems that don't include Jesus. So it becomes a matter of, well, either I'm misunderstanding what he's saying. That could be. Or he lied, or he's crazy, or
I think you're right. And that's what I'm saying. In Anthroposophy, those religions are looked at as historical because they were, and they brought gifts, historically, because they were pre-Christian. So how they worshipped divinity at that time, and that was beautiful. And there's gifts from that. But if you look at it like turning point of time, like Christianity, it's, you're right. I agree with that. I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes.
But you would say like other people within the sphere, or people that were worshiping God before the actual coming of Christ as a human and the birth of Christianity as a religion.
That was totally valid.
It was through Christ.
I mean, I would say that's what I was doing, because if I was here at that time, that's how I would worship God, because that was the way to do it.
Right. So what about like people today, like as we're 2023, and there's somebody maybe that says, well, let's say that they're not religious at all. Let's say they're atheists. Let's say they don't believe in any kind of divine power, any God, anything. Do you see them as outside of that circle that you're talking about, or are they're in there too?
Because we're all, some of the people who call themselves atheists are some of the most like sweet, loving, kind.
Oh, I'm sure they are. Absolutely.
So I see everything in terms of evolution of consciousness, and I hope that I'm not the same person today that I'll be in 10 years. I hope that I'll grow, and we're all growing, and that's all we can ask of each other.
Right.
So just because we're all in a step of development, and I was just telling my son this the other day. I was reading this, and it was talking about humanity and people, and when people aren't maybe nice or whatever, that it's not that they aren't good, or do so. It's not that all humans within are really at the root we're good, but maybe like he compared it to a fruit, and when a fruit is not ripe yet, it's tart and it's bitter.
Right.
But so if a human isn't really, where they need to be, they're just not ripe yet.
Right.
And it's not because we're all developing still as humans.
Right.
So we should never think poorly. The whole point was never to think poorly of others, because maybe that person just isn't ripe yet, and that's okay.
Right.
Right?
Sure. Stages of growth. And yeah, absolutely. So do you hold to like a concept of like original sin? Like, do you think that people are sinful inherently, or do you think they have to do bad things first in order to become that? Or
well, I think that okay, so as I said, Anthroposophy, like I can't live long enough to read all the books I ever want to read. It's vast and limitless.
Right.
That being said, that would get into in the Bible, Dionysius the Areopagite is mentioned. Well, there's a spiritual hierarchy, and you have like the bottom are humans, below us are animals, and then plants, and then stones.
Right.
Well, above us are angels, and then archangels, and then archai, and then the Kyriades, Dynamis, Exousiai, and then the thrones, seraphim, and cherubim. Like there's this threefold hierarchy.
So would you say those are like different ranks of like angels?
Right.
Okay.
So that being said, asking me the question about original sin, I would say that if we were perfect like angels, we wouldn't be in this body right now. So that's my idea of original sin. So the fact that we are born means that we're not quite angels yet, and we still have growth and work to do.
So it's the fleshly bodies that we're born into that contain the sin.
Well, I mean, and then you get into, see, this is where Anthroposophy gets beautiful for me, because then you can look at the Buddha. Well, the Buddha kept incarnating as a bodhisattva until he hit Buddha stage, and now he doesn't have to incarnate anymore.
He reached nirvana.
So, and so that being said, I mean, we're here, and the fact that we're in a body means that we're imperfect. And so we're imperfect.
Sure.
And basically we're all sinners,
right.
Because we wouldn't be in a body, we would be perfect. But that's the whole thing with original. So when I did teacher training, the director of the program talked me into doing my master's project right at the last month of school. And he's like, Monique, I think you should do your master's. He's like, you're young, you don't have any kids, you're going to be working in Hawaii, you'll have time. I'm like, because I just got my credential from Waldorf. I said, well, what would I even do it on?
Right.
And he's like, I think you should do it on that question you asked me like a year ago in class. I'm like, well, what question?
You're like, which one was that? Yeah.
So he's like, because I had read a lot of Steiner, and one of the books, who knows where, lecture, he had mentioned that when Leonardo da Vinci painted the Last Supper with the 12 apostles, that if you look at their hands, they're all doing like different things. And the reason that he did that is because each apostle was a symbol of the sign of the zodiac. So I guess I had asked the teacher after class, do you know which apostles connected to which sign of the zodiac? Oh, funny. So he's like, yeah, you should do it on that. But anyway,
so did you do it on that?
I did do it on that, and I forget where I was going with it.
Did you get a good grade?
Well, I don't know if I got a master's.
Well, there you go. That's better than a good grade.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I got the degree, so hey now.
Yeah. I don't even remember if it was about, I wasn't thinking grades at that point.
Right.
But okay, so going to that idea with original sin, if you look at the Bible as a whole, so of course I had to read the Bible and look at the Bible and all that for, it took me like 4 years to finish it.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big book.
Yeah, we'll finish the master's.
Oh, gotcha.
And when I'm studying, like, the apostles and all that.
Oh, yeah.
For this, connecting it to the signs of the zodiac, whatever. Okay, so that being said, when I looked, so this one book it was Edward Rioch Smith called The Burning Bush. I use that book a lot. So that being said, what he looks at the Bible as a whole. So if you have Adam at the beginning, and then at the very end you have the new Adam, right, in the book of Revelation.
Right. Which is Jesus, right?
So if you look at the story of the prodigal son, so the prodigal son is like the story of Adam, because we as humanity are the son who went out on our own. We sinned. But we decided to come back out of freedom.
Sure.
So we are different than angels because all the hierarchy, the angels, they have no free will.
Right.
But humanity
Yes.
has the option to choose evil.
Right.
And if we choose, like through the whole Bible, we come at the end, the new Adam.
Yeah.
Then that is even, like, we're the prodigal son.
Right.
Humanity is.
But would you say then that we have to choose that? Like, is that a choice?
We have a choice.
I mean, we have a choice, but I'm saying, like, in order to, like, I mean, I haven't even asked you if you believe in heaven and hell, but, like, would you say that to believe in that, to choose the Lord, that would be what we should do? Like, that would be the right choice?
Yes, there's good and there's evil, and it's real.
But if people believe, so this is what I'm getting to. So a minute ago when we were talking about, I asked you if, like, someone who's an atheist, and it is part of that circle, and you said yes, then you were saying there's some people, which I agree with you, there's some atheists that are wonderful people, some of the most loving, giving, caring people you'd ever meet. But what about somebody who's, like, the opposite of that? Somebody who's a child rapist or a mass murderer or somebody who's just a wretched human being. Do you see them in that circle too, or would you say that they are not redeemed because of their actions?
I don't. So that gets back to this. I was reading this book. I'm reading this book right now, and he's talking about, or I don't even know if it's that book. Who knows? I read too many books at one time, so it's hard to pay attention to my brain.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I get them all. They all bleed together in my head.
Yes, but one of them is so the greatest commandment is to. Oh no, it's a book that my teacher friend, told me to read. It's called Sacred Marriage.
Okay.
Have you read that book?
Who's it by? It's by.
I don't remember.
I think I have read it. Yeah.
Okay, so in
like
that
it says
the greatest commandment is to love your enemy.
Right. Well, it's to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's what Jesus said.
Yeah. So, or not only to love your neighbor, but even just to love those who are unlovable. Really.
Well, neighbor doesn't mean the person who lives next door to you. It means. Yeah. So your fellow human. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like it's not like if I can get myself out of the phase of judging anybody because I don't know where they came from, what their story is, what their childhood was like, what even like from my perspective, what their past lives were and where they're coming from.
Sure.
So I'm no one to judge anyone, and my job is to love.
But you couldn't judge an individual person, and I couldn't either, as far as saying that guy's not right. He's not right with the Lord. I know it. I could never say that. But like in a hypothetical, like a person like, let's say, Ted Bundy or whoever, Golden State Killer or whatever.
Klaus Schwab.
Bill Gates. Okay, we'll put Bill Gates.
Those are like my
love it. Okay, so we put Bill Gates in there. So what is Bill Gates, in your opinion? Not that we're judging him per se as a person. We're just using him as an example of a person who we wouldn't see as somebody who's following God. What would he need to do?
Choosing evil.
He's choosing evil right now. So what kind of a switch would he need to do in his life?
Depopulation agendas.
Okay. But I mean, like, if you were if he was sitting here across from you, and he's like, Monique, I'm doing the wrong things. I know I'm not right. Tell me what's the way? Like, what do I do? How do I choose the right thing here? And we're talking like eternity. Like, we're talking about like not just on Earth.
I think when you consciously choose evil, that's like a whole other level of evil. I mean, people make mistakes and they, have hard times or whatever. But when you're consciously choosing, like you have agendas and you're choosing to do these things, manipulating, I think that is a whole...
You think it's like a point of no return? Like
No. And so I don't want to get too far into this. I have a good friend that she is very well read in Anthroposophy, and she's a little older than me, so she's somebody I go to talk about these sort of things. But I think I don't know if I read this book a couple of years ago by Steiner, a lecture series called Pictures of the Apocalypse, and that really, at the beginning of all Steiner's lecture series, it says you really need a background before, in Anthroposophy before you read them, or it probably may not make sense. So that's why I'm trying to figure out. But yes, humanity, so we still have many chances for redemption. All of us, even the worst.
Sure. Even Bill Gates.
Absolutely. Yes.
He's the worst of the worst.
Yes, because I mean, that in my mind,
Right.
that's the person I have the hardest time with.
Sure.
Like,
Sure. Even more so than like a serial killer. That's awesome.
he is a serial killer
well,
in my
good
my
point.
book. I mean, look what I don't know if you look at what he's done in Africa and what he's done. I mean, they have sterilization drugs in the vaccines in Africa. You can. I mean, there's videos now. Robert Kennedy made videos on children's health defense on I forget what it's called, but they're intentionally putting this sterility aspect into the vaccines and injecting young women.
Is that because they want them to stop populating?
Yes.
Or okay.
And also, I mean, how could this guy who wants to save the world but also is really big in controlling the population? I mean, come on, it's like it doesn't. It's just. I mean, all the things he does. I mean. The Monsanto, what he did in India, all the suicides of the farmers, because I mean, he's done so much on the level. To me, he is like, he didn't just kill a few people. I think he's responsible for killing millions.
Wow.
So,
well, that makes sense,
I think to me, he's like on that level of like Hitler and
Okay.
these people like Klaus Schwab too, who are behind it. The World Economic Forum. These billionaires who weren't even elected, what right do they have to, do all the World Health Organization? I mean, all this.
Because they're rich.
Yeah.
They just have the money to do it.
It's just, to me, it's just so
but you would see him as being redeemable. Everybody is redeemable.
If they so choose.
Okay, so what are they so choosing, though? I guess that's what I'm kind of getting at. Like, if a person like that is to be redeemed, what do they have to choose?
Well, the greatest commandments is to love.
Okay.
Like God and each other.
Right. So what if you were over here? I'm sitting here on Bill Gates. I'm talking to you, and I said to you, "Well, Monique, I do love God with all my heart, and I do love my neighbor." How would you respond to me?
Well, if the actions that he's doing, I mean, with what he's doing in these countries, in India, what he's done. I mean, so many people have polio in Africa and India from the polio vaccine that they're using there that they know creates polio. They won't use it here in the U.S., but they're using it there and creating it.
Yeah.
Because it's a live virus.
Right.
And why are they doing that?
Okay. So you would say that, like, the actions of Bill Gates, even if he said the words, "I'm loving my neighbor," he'd say, "No, you're not," because you're saying that with your mouth, but your actions are proving otherwise.
And he's making billions of dollars off the vaccines.
Okay.
And he's not even a doctor.
So he would have to change his entire life of what he's doing. Okay. So if he just stopped all that research, he stopped pouring money into that kind of stuff, and he started opening orphanages where he was helping children, then you think at that point you might start to believe him that he might be redeemed? Okay.
Yeah.
So for as far as that being, it's almost like a kind of a merit system in a sense, right? You either do the good or you do the bad.
Our actions,
which I think our actions are important. I would agree with that too.
Deeds and karma.
Sure. But in kind of your spiritual path, like you worded it, your spiritual path, how does Jesus fit into that aspect of like doing good versus like, in other words, if all I have to do is do good and not do bad, can't Jesus just be out of the picture then? And I can get in to an afterlife and my own merit of doing good?
Well, okay, so if you get into for Anthroposophy, so there's Rosicrucianism, and in Rosicrucianism, so there's different aspects to it. There's Manichaeanism, which I resonate a lot with. And Manichaeanism is the idea that evil can be transformed.
Okay.
And
like evil itself, not just evil people, but like evil itself can be transformed into something good. Okay.
And in fact, the Albigensians were considered Manichaeanism, and they were considered heretics and completely wiped out. And anyways, so that's Manichaeanism. Rosicrucianism is that you don't even say the word Christ. You're not really even allowed to say it.
Because it's sacred? Okay.
You cannot say that word, and you can't because you can't even claim it. You can, but you live it. And that's the Rosicrucian path.
And those are both
within Anthroposophy.
Within Anthroposophy. So those aren't they're not necessarily conflicting ideas. They're just two.
Everybody's different. And so we all have different histories.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every human being. So you can't, it's hard. That's what I mean. It's like, I can't really judge anybody.
It's hard to put it in a box.
No.
Because it's so open. And again, that's why I think it's, to me, a belief system like that is more easy to accept, right? Because it's not so narrow. It says, everybody's accepted, which I would say, I think Christianity says everybody's accepted as long as you receive the message, right? You receive the gospel, you receive Jesus, or whatever. But it's also very narrow-minded in the sense of saying, Jesus making the claim that he's the only way, right? I think that's what to me what stands apart from Christianity.
I think ultimately it is the only way, but it's. But so Christ, that's what I'm going to the mystery of Golgotha. I mean, from what Steiner shared, like as humanity, we barely understand the significance of the Christ's incarnation upon the earth. Like we have our understanding of that mystery is so limited at this point in time. Like it continues to unravel and unfold. And that's why I love studying anthroposophy, because for me, it gives me more insight into that. But even Steiner said the insights that are given are still so limited, even as much as can be given,
right? Because
it was such a tremendous event that completely changed the whole evolution of our earth. So and it's just a mystery. It's really something we don't really know.
And I mean, I would say even most of the stuff in the Bible is a mystery. Like, I would never claim, even though I've read the whole Bible, I some of it, lots of times, like there's verses I could quote to you and by memorization, all that, but that doesn't mean that I understand it. Like there's a lot in there I don't understand. There's a lot that I read and I go, okay, well I can read that. I know that's what it says, but what that means got me. Right? Because it doesn't always say what it means. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it just makes a statement or just says something. You're like, okay, I don't get that, but I'm okay with that. I don't. I've said before, if I can understand the God of all the universe 100%, that's not a God I want, right? Because that means he's on my level. I need a God that is far beyond me, right? That's the only God that I would even believe in, because I don't need another human. As far as that goes,
And even like that ninefold spiritual hierarchy, this book, Edward Riog Smith, it goes into that, but then it talks about like the Christ and the sacrificial lamb, and like all of that is like above that spiritual hierarchy. You know what I mean? And it, like you can, I try to, and then it gets into the zodiac and the epochs and evolution of time, and it's like really a lot. It's like a lot to try to figure out.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of information there for sure.
Yeah. And even the earth itself as a being. Right.
Okay. Just a couple more things I'm playing off of what you said earlier. I want to go back to a couple things. So do you believe in a heaven and hell or no?
I believe in a spiritual world.
Okay. Which is going on right now, right, though?
Right now it's...
Because I believe there's a spiritual world all around us as we sit here. We can't see it, but it's here.
We don't have the organs at this point in time. But sometimes you can sense and you can feel and you can have experiences.
Right.
And... So spiritual world. So definitely a spiritual world. And so this is interesting. I don't know where I was reading this just recently too, but it was talking about, Steiner says this a lot, that a lot of people say, I don't need to find out about the spiritual world because I'll figure that out when I die.
Right.
But what Steiner says is that while we're incarnated on earth, we can research and understand this, learn about the spiritual world. And all of that we learned while we were here, when we go to, out of our physical body, we take that with us. But if we're on the earth and we never bothered to learn anything about the spiritual world and we just completely materialists, when we get to the other side, it is more like a hell. Because we don't, it's almost like what you bring with you, what you gathered here, and if you didn't, then it's going to be kind of dark and lonely.
And that hell quote unquote place you just mentioned, is that something you can come out of?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because
so it's not like once you get there, you're screwed.
He has a book called Theosophy, and in that he details like the different, and actually goes back to when I was like 15, I think, or 16. I read, have you ever read those like The Light Beyond and Light After Light, those books about like near-death experiences?
Yeah, like Piper and some of those other guys. Don Piper had one.
There was somebody else like Raymond Moody or something, I can't remember. But anyways, I read them and I was like telling my friends, oh, you should read this. Oh, you read this book. And I
right.
to my friends to read. So that's why I said I was always a little bit different.
Yeah. But so that's okay. So that's a good springboard into kind of what I was saying. So we've mentioned a few times, you just said like, out-of-body experience, not out-of-body, what would you say?
Near-death experience.
Near-death experience, or you have something like a spiritual experience, or you have, like you just mentioned, the spiritual realm. Sometimes we can sense it, that it's around us.
You get a dream about somebody and they died the day before.
Right. Well, that's interesting. Like if something like that happened, I would maybe put a little more validity there, because it's like, I just dreamt about this, then it happened. So that would be eerie for somebody like, whoa. But I'm just talking about like things like, well, I sense the spirit, or I feel the spiritual world, or like the guy Steiner, how you had said he had these experiences, or he was clairvoyant kind of thing. In your opinion, how do we test that stuff? Or do we need to, like, in other words, if you receive something like that, let's say we were sitting right here and a being appeared next to you and said, hi, Monique, I'm so-and-so, the spirit, and whatever, and let's say I can't see him, but you can, and you can hear him, and all of a sudden you turn that way and you start talking, and I'm going, what are you doing? And then you tell me this experience that just happened to you, and I would say, well, how do you know that that was real? First of all, if you're the only one that can see it. And secondly, how do you know that anything that spirit said to you was true? Like, is there anything you would test that by, or? So
I think it goes back to that feeling for truth that we develop within ourselves. And it's interesting because right after I said I would do this talk, so there's this little book called Calendar of the Soul, and there's like a verse for every week for the 52 weeks or whatever of the year that I read by Steiner. Every morning I try to. And so the one that, right after I said that, then I open it on Sunday, and the one for this week is the stern command is that you don't share any of your inner things that you're developing. Don't share them with other people? It was like, just like for right now, you keep them within to ripen.
Gotcha. And
I was like, oh, I probably need to be really careful about like what I say, because that was like the Calendar of the Soul verse for this week. And
right.
I already said I was going to do this talk, and you said spirituality.
Or just share the stuff that's ripe, you know?
Right, exactly, exactly. So that's why I'm trying to be like, think. So I think that, you can have, like, say you had a perception like that, that's not ripe yet. So you don't share it. And sometimes if you share it, it actually diminishes it. Okay. So it's a lot you just keep within, and that's what I've learned. How do you know when it's ripe? How do you know? Yeah, like let's say I had that experience and I don't share it because it's not ripe. I assume I know somehow it's not ripe. But then at what point do I get to where I'm like, oh, I think it's ripe now, I'm going to share it? I don't think I think for the most part, I think Steiner was exceptional. And in that book too, How to Know Higher Worlds, another quote that I really like from it was, the heights of the spirit are reached the portals of humility, but also for every one step you take in spiritual knowledge, you need to take 3 steps in morality, and so, or spiritual wisdom and knowledge. And I have to remember that because I'm always like wanting to learn everything. Right. So, which is awesome. Yeah, but awesome. It's like sometimes like, you have to also think about being a more, all that stuff. So, right. So I say that, I think we just need to be humble and just, I think humility. I just think we need to be humble, because we don't, you might think you have a spiritual experience, but you're not really sure until it's really ripe and you're 100% sure. Right. You just need to keep it. Well, let me use an example that I've used lots of times, and this is a true story. There was a woman, you may have heard this, it was years ago. There was a woman that drowned her 3 children in the bathtub. And when she was questioned after this, said, why did you do that? Right? And she said, God told me to. That was her reason. She says, God told me that I needed to drown my children because it was for their purification or whatever the religious reasons were, right? Now we hear a story like that and we think,
you're crazy. You don't drown your children, right? But to this woman, she had a very real, supposedly, experience where she feels God told her, no, if you love your children, you will drown them in the tub. Okay? So if someone like her came to you and said, no, that's what God told me to do, how would you refute that? Like, how can you prove to her that God did not tell her to drown her children?
That, in fact, I think in How to Know Higher Worlds, so one of the things that is spoken about in there is that we are all crossing the threshold right now as humanity. Remember I said like how we went down into matter and now we're coming back out. So we're starting to, as humanity, have these spiritual experiences even if we don't really want them.
Right.
And Steiner talks about our thinking and our feeling and our willing, and they're starting to separate themselves out a little bit in us now, so we can feel a little discombobulated and disconnected. If, as humanity, like we don't, I feel like the Christ within,
right?
If we don't figure that out, and we stay immoral and a disintegrated culture and all of this, then we will have more and more of those experiences, because we have people who haven't worked on themselves consciously, who and now they're starting to have these parts of themselves kind of separate out. We're moving into that phase. So you have people like that where they have this disconnected part. Their brain told them to do this, but they haven't developed and worked on themselves. Like Steiner says, for every one step in spiritual wisdom, we need 3 steps in morality. We have the freedom to choose and work on ourselves. And so if we're not doing that, then that can happen, and it probably is happening more.
Sure. But like, I guess like more like, why is that? Why do you and I hear that and say that's definitely wrong for her to murder her children? It sounds like a stupid question, but I mean, because most of us would hear that and go, that was definitely wrong. But what am I basing that on? How do I know that was wrong of her to do that? How can I be sure that God didn't tell her to do that? Because if God told her to do it, then it wasn't wrong, right? Because God's not wrong. God does nothing but right.
But if God is a God of love, he would not have said to do that.
Well, right. But how do we know God is a God of love? So here's what I'm getting at. I would answer that by saying, well, I know God is a God of love because the Bible says he's a God of love, right? I would know that she wasn't supposed to kill her children because the Bible says murder is wrong, right? And you get into this whole idea of morality where if an atheist...
you also know. I mean...
But she also knew that it was right for her to kill her children. See, that's my point. If we're just going off what I feel versus what she feels, what I feel doesn't trump what she feels.
Yeah.
Because it's her feeling.
Right, yeah.
So,
and that gets back to individuals. Like I said, there's thinking, feeling, and willing, and we're all one way more or the other. So Steiner has another book called The Philosophy of Spiritual Activity, and that's more like coming from the mind.
Right.
I resonate more with How to Know Higher Worlds because that's coming to it from this part. And so it's like different people connect to source, divine, God, different ways. And because we're all... So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like, so for you, like it would be that, but it's different for everybody.
Sure.
Like, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, the only point I make with that is that I think for me, I need to test myself and my beliefs and my thoughts and my feelings. And the only thing tangible that I see that I can do that with is the Bible. Because if I go and I ask a friend, hey, what do you think I should do here? Right? That's another human basically telling me what his opinion is, but his opinion could be just as flawed, if not more so, than mine. So then again, how do I test his thoughts and opinion? Like, so for me anyway, in my that's why I have God told me to murder my kids. All right, it's like, nope, murder's wrong. God wouldn't tell me to do that. That's my answer. I mean, I would know the answer anyway because I'm not psychotic, but I'm saying somebody who is psychotic.
The reason that I wouldn't necessarily completely do that is because I think sometimes people use the Bible to justify things that I don't think even are okay. Like if you're going to go to the Old Testament, it's going to contradict the New Testament. I mean, there's so much in the Bible that I feel like I have to have what in philosophy of freedom is called ethical individualism, or as an individual, you develop within yourself the ability to discern, but what may be right in one situation may not be right in the other situation. So it makes it a lot harder to, like, I have Steiner and I have the Bible and I have all these tools, but at the end of the day, I am ultimately responsible for my decisions.
Oh, I agree with you completely.
So,
yes.
I see the Bible as a tool, but then sometimes I might be like, well, it says both things basically in the Bible, so I'm going to lean towards the New Testament, but, Sure. And I feel like, honestly, I really, it's one of the things that I've realized recently is I'd really like to learn more about the New Testament, because I've read like bits, but I haven't read it from like beginning to end. Yeah. Like I did that in 3rd grade when I was in Old Testament when I was young. My dad had a Bible under his bed.
You read the whole Old Testament in 3rd grade?
I took it out and like
Wow, that's impressive.
Which is weird because in Waldorf schools, 3rd grade's when you read the Old Testament. So I'm like, I kind of like intuitively did the right thing.
Wow. Without even knowing about Waldorf.
No. A lot of it because it's it just works that way. So yeah, I just
well, I would suggest starting in the book of John.
Well, right now I was starting, but see, what I'm doing is I'm reading commentaries on the book.
Right.
I mean, I've read the book.
Sure.
But it's like and so
commentaries can be good.
So I actually am working with Matthew.
Okay.
But it's like, and then I was like, gosh, I'd be fun to join one of these Bible groups. I'm like, but no, I just have to be there and keep my mouth shut.
As soon as you shared some of the stuff you're talking about, they'd be like, you're in the wrong room, lady.
Yeah. But like, because I love studying with other people. Like, it's like my favorite thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
Is to read books,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and talk about it. And I love that kind of stuff too. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Anyways.
All right. That's it.
Okay.
We're done. Unless you got anything else you want to add or...
No, the last part was easier. The first 2 parts were hard.
Oh, yeah?
I'm sorry, Kitty. I'm so sorry.
She's fine.
What's Kitty Cat's name?
That's Earl the girl.
Oh,
yeah. She is a girl, yes. Thanks for checking out this week's episode. Please join the Facebook group to continue these conversations, and I would greatly appreciate your feedback. You can reach me at Why Can't We Talk About That at proton.me. Now here's a clip from next week's episode.
I don't know if you follow Tucker Carlson. Yeah. Anyway, he managed to get the flash drive that was on Hunter Biden's laptop, and basically, this is what made me crack up laughing. Is basically all the pictures was Hunter Biden having sex with like all of these Russian hookers.
Right.
In Russia.
Right.
And you know what's even the funniest thing about it? He used his dad's credit card.
Yeah. What an idiot. It's like, dude, think, man. But if he's all on drugs, he's probably not thinking anyway, so.
He was. I mean, why do you think that every time when they tell Hunter, oh, well, you need to take a pee test, he always turns it down?